What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions live stream. Today is roster cut down day. The Lions have until 4 p.m., so about an hour and 15 minutes until we are going to know the entirety of the Detroit Lions 2023 active roster, at least for the time being. Now, I wanted to just get on here, really the first chance I've had in a while, to just sit down on this day, kind of go over everybody that's being cut, everybody that's being waived, everybody that's making the roster, and just get a good chance to talk about the Detroit Lions roster in depth and take a look at everybody that's being cut, waived, signed, as well as a couple guys around the league that are being waived from one team but could have interest or value for the Detroit Lions. So let's start off today by taking a look at the players that have been released and the players that have been waived, talking about whether they could come back on the practice squad or whether their time in Detroit is likely done for good. Now, we're going to start off with Christian Covington, the defensive lineman that was signed out of free agency a few weeks ago, and he was released. He was a player that I thought had a very good preseason, a guy that was very clearly a backup rotational depth piece, but very clearly had some value with his leadership, with his veteran presence, and very clearly had an identity and parts to play on this defense. I do think that he will be back. I think that he's a player that obviously wasn't going to beat out Aleem McNeil, wasn't going to beat out Isaiah Buggs, probably wasn't going to beat out Levi Onwuzurike with the way he was playing, wasn't going to beat out Broderick Martin, and with what with what Benito Jones was able to show last year, I think that Christian Covington at best would have been your D-line sixth, and I think that is just unlikely for that player to make the roster. Will he be back? It is very possible. I think that they still value that leadership on the practice squad, but I don't think he would be impactful enough on game days to warrant keeping him around and kicking off a guy from the squad like Romeo Okwara or another depth piece that could have a little bit more impact on game days. Now, Bobby Hart was an offensive lineman for the Detroit Lions, played a lot of the preseason, didn't play particularly well, and for that reason, he was released. I don't think Bobby Hart's going to be coming back. There's a lot of other offensive linemen the Detroit Lions have in store, a lot more offensive linemen the Detroit Lions clearly favor a little bit more, so likely he will not be returning. One Pride 40 says, hearing rumblings about Houston getting traded. I think that's people outside of Detroit not knowing how good James Houston is, not knowing how much the Detroit Lions value James Houston as a football player. I would be genuinely shocked if the Detroit Lions trade James Houston. They're in a position where they're trying to win the North, right? They're in a position, they're trying to make the playoffs. They're trying to host a playoff game. They're trying to live up to this hype. And Brad Holmes' whole philosophy is draft players and have those players make impact plays. It wouldn't really follow the identity of the Detroit Lions to draft this guy in the 6th round, have him break out, have him be a really good player, have him absolutely dominate in the preseason, and clearly have a role on this defense as a pass rush specialist, just to go out and trade him for a pick, right? And likely nobody's going to trade a 3rd or even a 2nd round pick for James Houston, despite that probably being his value, right? You take a look at the rookie pass rushers last year, and James Houston outproduced multiple 1st round pass rushers from a productivity standpoint, from a playmaking standpoint, and just from an efficiency standpoint. James Houston was arguably the best rookie pass rusher a season ago and outperformed guys like Trayvon Walker, outperformed and was more efficient than guys like Kayvon Thibodeau, like Jermaine Johnson from the New York Jets, right? There are so many people that he was just simply better than last year. I would even say was more efficient than Aiden Hutchinson. And if he played the whole season at the rate he was going, he would have likely won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Trading that player away, even if it's for a 2nd round pick, doesn't seem like the right idea because you're already getting 1st round production out of a 6th round pick. And what are the odds that that 2nd round pick at the absolute best case scenario even is the same player James Houston is? So to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I know the Detroit Lions love Aiden Hutchinson. They love Charles Harris. They like the Okwara brothers. They really like, John Kaminsky who's there. They love Josh Paschal. And yeah, from a name standpoint, from a salary cap standpoint, sure, maybe James Houston is at the bottom, but I really don't see that being the case. I think James Houston is going to get just as many reps as John Kaminsky, just as many pass rush reps as Charles Harris, right? He's going to get a lot of opportunities this year, and trading him away, especially knowing how good he was last year, knowing how much of a steal he was, and knowing how good he is under contract for the next couple of seasons, really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I've seen those rumors around too. I think they're completely false. I think it's just something like, hey, this is a player that played really well in the preseason. He's a former 6th-round pick. Let's say he's on the trade block because he's a 6th-round pick and the Lions are playing him a lot in the preseason. I don't think that's true at all. I think the Lions played him a lot in the preseason to try to get him to develop the off-ball stuff, try to get him to develop the run stopping, the edge setting stuff, and they're going to use him as a pass rusher all season long. You're going to need Houston on Thursday. Yeah, you're going to need Justin Houston to get to Patrick Mahomes, right? He seems to be one of the guys on the defense that can actually finish plays, actually chase down the quarterback. And honestly, I think he's going to be a really big part in the Detroit Lions' success on Thursday night if they are to win this football game. If they're going to win, they're going to have to get to Patrick Mahomes over and over and over. And your best pass rusher right now is James Houston. The best guy equipped to get to Patrick Mahomes right now is James Houston. I would not get rid of that guy for even a 2nd-round pick at this point. Getting back to the players that have been released. Germain Ifedi, a former 1st-round pick, a player that a lot of people thought was going to make the roster, didn't end up making it to the 53. Was actually part of the 1st round of releases. And obviously that is not what a lot of people thought was going to happen. But I think it kind of makes sense, right? Connor Galvin played very well. You obviously have guys like Matt Nelson, who played very well in the preseason on the boundary, and you have Colby Sorsdale, who has that tackle guard versatility. I think Germain Ifedi is going to be back if he is not signed away somewhere else. The Lions need offensive line depth probably more than any team in the NFL at this point. If somebody goes down, their tackle depth right now is a little bit unproven. And I think that they're going to want a guy like Germain Ifedi that can slide in, has been a starter for a long time, and really been a great option for them in the preseason. One Pride 40 disagrees. Houston is a close second to Hutch. I think James Houston is a more efficient pass rusher than Aiden Hutchinson. I think Aiden Hutchinson is a great player. I think he's a better football player, but he's going to be the guy that's double teamed. He's going to be the guy that's taking away all the pressure. He's going to be the guy that's supposed to stop the run. He's going to be the guy that has a lot of roles to play. Whereas James Houston, you put him in on 3rd down and you say, go get the quarterback. One-on-one, left tackle, right tackle, bend around the edge, win on the inside, go get the quarterback. And I think that role is better for James Houston. I think he's a better pass rusher, and he was a better pass rusher play for play last year than Aiden Hutchinson was. So, yeah, by all means, Aiden Hutchinson is a better football player, but as far as an edge rusher, as far as somebody who's more disruptive versus the pass, and I think can make bigger plays because he's not getting double teamed, he's not the focus of the defense or the offensive line, I think James Houston could have a bigger impact than Aiden Hutchinson week 1 in the box score. And I think James Houston can get to the quarterback a couple of times while Aiden Hutchinson's eating up those double blocks and doing kind of the tough things that nobody really sees. Jason Moore and Divine Azigbo really didn't have a huge chance to make the roster. Jason Moore especially signed on after the first preseason game, signed on after Jameson Williams did get hurt and really did not have a chance. I think I had 1 reception in the preseason and just never really was able to get a great opportunity. And then Divine Azigbo had 11 carries in week 1 of the preseason after Muhammad Ibrahim went down with injury. And unfortunately, he just never was able to make very much of his carries. He was outperformed by Jamar Jefferson. He was outperformed by Snell, who came in late in the preseason process, and just overall really didn't have too many opportunities to make the roster. It was an uphill battle to begin with. And when you're not making the most of your carries, averaging less than 2 yards per carry, unfortunately, you're not quite going to make the roster. Could he return to special teams? Could he return to the practice squad? Absolutely, but I don't necessarily see it happening right now. Devoted to Detroit says, what's good? Glad to see you in here. Houston is getting chipped all the time, so I listen for 10 seconds, and you prove you don't know what you're doing. Give up or work harder. I appreciate the feedback, but James Houston gets a lot of one-on-ones, got a lot of one-on-ones last year. And yeah, in the preseason, he did get chipped quite a few times. And even in the regular season, he got chipped quite a bit. But he's not being consistently double-teamed like Aiden Hutchinson is. Yeah, the tight end might chip James Houston, but he's not being double-teamed for the entire play. Aiden Hutchinson consistently gets taken by 2 offensive linemen, and that is a double team. He gets more work. Aiden Hutchinson gets more of the offensive line's attention than James Houston does. And James Houston was far more efficient than Aiden Hutchinson last year as a pass rusher, as a blitzer, just overall getting to the quarterback. James Houston did it better at a more efficient rate than Aiden Hutchinson did. So, yeah, he might not get clean one-on-ones every single play, but he's going to get a lot more one-on-one looks than Aiden Hutchinson's going to get this year. Taking a look at the wave players. Trinity Benson is a player that, again, had a very uphill battle to make this roster, was traded by the Denver Broncos a few seasons ago and just never really was able to stick with the Lions, right? Had a great opportunity in year one when the wide receiving core was very poor, wasn't ever able to really find a great connection with Jared Goff, has been cut several times, has been brought back several times, and I would fully expect him to be staying on the practice squad roster. Avery Davis, again, a late addition to this wide receiving core after Jameson Williams got hurt, is probably not going to return as a wide receiver, but is a player to potentially keep an eye on as a practice squad guy. Obini Azie, a player that had a lot of hype last offseason, never really lived up to it, despite having some great intangibles, despite having some great measurables and a great physical aspect of being an offensive lineman. He just never seems to really put it together. Doesn't quite have the quickest feet, doesn't quite have the best hands, and just despite on paper looking like a very solid left tackle candidate, just never seems to really be the great offensive lineman that his physical traits would lead you to believe he could be. Now, due to those physical traits, I do believe that he, again, could return to the practice squad just like last year, but I don't know, with the emergence of Connor Galvin playing very well, as well as a couple of other undrafted free agent linemen playing pretty well in the preseason, Obini Azie is certainly being challenged for that spot. And if it's between him and Connor Galvin, I don't think Obini Azie is quite going to make the roster. Now, Daniel Helm is a player that seemingly, at least in my opinion, was always talked about for the wrong reasons in the preseason. Whether it was a penalty, whether it was a drop pass, whether it was this, that, or another, Daniel Helm never seemed to be talked about positively, never seemed to be able to make a big play. When there were big plays to be made, it seemed like Daniel Helm was the reason they got called back, had multiple big holding calls, had a big pass interference call in the first game versus the Giants, had a big drop pass versus the Carolina Panthers. And unfortunately, with the tight end depth that we do currently have with James Mitchell, with Sam Laporta, with Brock Wright, I don't think that Daniel Helm really had an option. And I even think the Lions may go as far as to go look for another tight end in free agency like Albert Okwuegbunam, because I do think they could potentially use a fourth tight end, at least on the practice squad, and Daniel Helm just really didn't live up to it. I did get a notification saying the Lions are moving Emmanuel Moseley off the physically enabled formulas and now open the season on the active roster, which is a really, really good sign for the Detroit Lions secondary. Obviously, Emmanuel Moseley is a player that the Lions signed in free agency. He's a player that, is just likely going to be a starting cornerback for the Detroit Lions, and he was just activated from the PUP list just a few minutes ago. I also got a notification from a subscriber that Amani Oruwariye has officially been released from the New York Giants. Obviously, a former Detroit Lions player, was actually looked at by a lot of Giants fans as a steal of free agency and ended up making the active roster. Didn't have the greatest preseason, was actually targeted quite a few times, I believe, if I remember correctly, by the Detroit Lions, and ended up not making the active roster. So does Hutch. I see Hutch getting double digits. As far as sacks, I think Aiden Hutchinson can absolutely get double digits, but I think James Houston is, like I said, like he was last year, a more prolific pass rusher. I think he's got better bend than Aiden Hutchinson. I think he's a little quicker than Aiden Hutchinson. And I think he could even likely be a little bit more versatile than Aiden Hutchinson. And that's not to spite Aiden Hutchinson. I think Aiden Hutchinson is the number one alpha pass rusher that we need. And I think he might even finish the season with the most sacks on the team. In fact, I think he likely will finish with the most sacks on the team. But if you're going play by play, if you're going, snap for snap, I think James Houston will end the season being the most efficient pass rusher on the team. And if you put him in on a 3rd and 9, I think more teams are going to look to double and chip Aiden Hutchinson than they're going to look to go after James Houston. That's how it was last year, as Aiden Hutchinson, again, was the highest double-teamed player in the NFL. It's because he's that good of a football player as a rookie, and that opens up a lot of other opportunities for guys to play. Any trades that is going to happen before 4 p.m. today? Very possible. I've heard the Detroit Lions are in on some kickers. At least they've been doing their homework on some kickers. It really depends. There's probably going to be a lot of trades around the NFL. Are the Detroit Lions going to partake? I have no idea, but it is certainly possible that that does happen. I do see the Chiefs trading. The Chiefs actually, I think, did trade for a defensive tackle earlier today. I believe they sent a 7th-round pick to the Las Vegas Raiders in exchange for a defensive tackle, which, reading between the lines, tells you that maybe Chris Jones might not be so willing to play in a couple days on Thursday Night Football. All right, let's go down the list a little bit. Talk about Dylan Drummond. Dylan Drummond was a undrafted free agent, wasn't signed out of UDFA, actually didn't even get a contract offer until the end of rookie minicamp. He was an invite-only player. He was a camp invite, didn't really have very many expectations of making the team. The Lions clearly didn't see too much in him to start, as he was never signed before rookie minicamp was started. He was an invite-only player. He didn't get any money for that camp. He just showed up and tried to make the team. Ended up being the best player at camp, ended up being one of the better receivers throughout training camp, OTAs, and minicamp, but unfortunately wasn't quite able to show up when the lights were the brightest. And although I thought he had a good game versus Carolina, I thought he had a good, solid performance versus the New York Giants, it just wasn't quite enough for him to make the active roster. Chase Cota was a little bit better. Antoine Green was a little bit better, and unfortunately, with some of the veteran wide receivers already ahead of him on the roster, that's going to mean that he isn't going to be active. However, I do think Dylan Drummond, not having a lot of hype before the NFL preseason, right? Not even getting signed by a team or looked at by any teams other than the hometown Detroit Lions, will mean that he's probably not going to get too many looks as a waiver wire pickup, right? He's going to be a guy that still flies under the radar. Everybody's going to look at him and say, okay, we looked at this guy in college, didn't even think he was worth a UDFA spot. He didn't end up making the Lions roster. Probably not worth it, leaving the Detroit Lions the ability to bring him back to the practice squad, continue to develop him, continue to let him practice on the team, and continuing to keep him as a member of the team, not quite being an active member of the team. An hour to go, and we will pick up from other teams after for Lions fan. Yeah, I think there's a good chance the Lions end up picking up a few players. That's what I have on the side over here under interest. I think Brandon Smith could be an interesting player, I believe, 4th or 5th round pick by the Carolina Panthers last year. Super athletic linebacker, formerly of Penn State. A player that doesn't really have a position, isn't really a refined linebacker, but is an extremely high-level athlete and is a former Penn State linebacker, and from a school that produces top quality linebackers into the NFL. I don't know if they're going to have Brandon Smith on the practice squad. They could potentially use him as a special teams guy or find a role for someone with the athleticism of Brandon Smith. He's a player that was just today cut by the Carolina Panthers. Again, still a former draft pick, a guy that was taken in the 5th round just a few years ago. It seems like maybe with a guy with that kind of athleticism, that kind of athletic profile, you could at least see him becoming a special teams guy or a practice squad guy, if nothing else. Anthony Schwartz, the former 3rd round pick of the Cleveland Browns just 2 drafts ago, was also released. He does have a drop problem. He does have some inconsistencies with injuries, but he also runs 4.2 something speed and is an absolute burner down the boundary. He could be a special teams player. He could be a deep ball specialist. And although the Browns did cut him, Anthony Schwartz was selected fairly highly a few seasons ago for a reason. He does have game-breaking speed, and despite not necessarily fitting on the Browns, could maybe be a look for Detroit Lions practice squad, maybe be a call-up for JMO when he's missing the game, because he is probably the only player, if he were to join the Lions roster, that could realistically replace Jameson Williams' speed at the position. Another player the Browns ended up cutting was Demetric Feldman, a 6th round pick from the 2020 NFL draft class, a player from UCLA that I was very high on as a prospect, a player that is more of a wide receiver playing running back, but I think that could be a really interesting thing for the Lions to go after, right? Somebody that, if Jahmyr Gibbs is to go down, can replace that skill set more naturally than David Montgomery, can replace that skill set more naturally than Craig Reynolds or Jamar Jefferson or Benny Snell, right? Have a true receiver as your backup to Jahmyr Gibbs, so that unfortunately, if Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get hurt, you have somebody that can plug and play immediately on the practice squad without missing too much of a beat. Again, Demetric Feldman, a really fluid wide receiver-esque running back, a player that is much better in the screen game, much better in the short game than he is in between the tackles. I think that doesn't necessarily fit what the Browns want in a running back, but certainly seems to fit with what the Detroit Lions want in a running back. And then another cut today, and what might add to this list as we go on, is Albert Okwuegbunam, the former draft pick of the Denver Broncos, a player that just a few days ago in the last preseason game for the Denver Broncos, I believe had 7 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown. I saw something earlier saying his last preseason game was really incredible, and off the top of my head, I believe those are the numbers that I read. However, they may be off by just a little bit. Albert Oboe, Albert O, is a really big tight end. I believe 6'5", had a lot of hype coming out of the draft. I'm not entirely sure why he didn't end up making the Broncos roster, but as a team in the Detroit Lions that likes to use their tight ends with quarterback Jared Goff, and a team that currently only has 3 rostered and obviously none on the practice squad quite yet, Albert, I think, is more talented than Daniel Helm, is a little bit even more talented than Shane Zylstra, who they expected to make the roster this season. So if they're looking for a depth tight end, somebody with some receiving ability, somebody that's still young, somebody with some size for the red zone, I do think that Albert O could be a potential guy the Detroit Lions have some interest in to bring into the practice squad and at least give an opportunity, if nothing else, to try to make a practice squad team. Now, going back to the waived players, because there's a couple more guys that I was a little bit surprised about. Connor Galvin, the offensive tackle, UDFA player from the University of Baylor, a former first-team All Pac-12 offensive lineman, a guy that was really, really good in the preseason, gave up 1 sack, but for the most part was very good in both pass protection as well as run blocking. Connor Galvin is a player I fully expected to make the roster. I thought he was going to make the roster. I had him in my final 53 predictions. He made the first round of cuts as Bobby Hart and Jermaine Ifedi and Alex Millette all got cut, as did Darian Paulo. He made the first round of cuts. It seemed like he had a good red carpet all the way up to the starting lineup, not necessarily starting lineup, but the 53-man lineup, the active roster. And unfortunately, he was released, leaving just 3 depth offensive linemen on the roster and 8 players total on the roster for the Detroit Lions offensive line. Taylor Decker's your left tackle, Jonah Jackson's your left guard, Frank Ragnow is your center, with Halapaloe Vaitai or Graham Glasgow being your right guard, Penei Sewell being your right tackle. That means Big V or Graham Glasgow will be kind of the backup guard, with Colby Sorsdale being the backup right tackle / right guard, and Matt Nelson being the backup left tackle. That doesn't leave a ton of depth if one player is to get hurt, but I think that they could bring back Connor Galvin. From what I've heard, I've talked to people that know Connor Galvin and that said that if he doesn't get picked up off of waivers, they want to bring him back. They want him to be a member of the team, but he just wasn't quite good enough to make the active roster right away. But they very much want to bring him back in order to develop him further and going forward. The Broncos had too many good tight ends, but Albert O has some big upside. Yeah, that is kind of what I've been hearing as well. The Denver Broncos have some good tight ends in their room, and I'm not sure exactly what he has done with the Denver Broncos so far. I haven't followed the Denver Broncos super closely, nor have I followed Albert O since entering the NFL, but there seems to be a lot of hype around him. There seems to be a lot of people that think he can still do big things. And as a tight end 4, as a practice squad tight end, it doesn't hurt to add more talent to the receiving core. It doesn't hurt to give Jared Goff another security blanket if it does come down to that. And I do think there is some good opportunity for him to make some rosters, even if he wasn't quite there for the Denver Broncos. Now, big news today is Parker Romo officially being released. From all reports in camp, it seemed like Parker Romo as well as Riley Patterson were neck and neck for the starting kicker position, but Riley Patterson being a little bit more surefire in between the 40s or from 40 in did give him the edge today. It seems as though Parker Romo is not going to be a member of the Detroit Lions unless he returns to the practice squad, with Riley Patterson officially winning the kicking duties for the Detroit Lions in 2023. Now, that does not mean that Riley Patterson will officially be the kicker going forward. There's been a lot of things saying that he is potentially, and the Lions are potentially looking for a replacement kicker. They've been looking for the Saints for a kicker. They've been looking around the NFL potentially for a kicking opportunity as well. And they haven't quite found it yet, but I think that Riley Patterson is more than capable. He kicked for the Jacksonville Jaguars last year, a playoff team. He was a guy that was very solid again from inside the 40, outside the 45 into that 50-yard range. Gets a little bit questionable, but from a guy that's inside the 40 for an offense that is top of the NFL, I don't know how many 50-plus yard field goals the Lions had to kick last year, but I don't remember too many big kicks coming down to 50-plus yards. The offense is good enough to get in range, and Riley Patterson is good enough to knock it down when it counts, especially, like I said, if it's within 40 to 45 yards. And then the last big UGFA that a lot of people were excited about was Adrian Martinez. Adrian Martinez, the undrafted rookie free agent from Kansas State. He's a player the Lions looked at with their top 30 visits. He's a player that the Lions visited with at the NFL Combine. He's a player that took up interview spots at pretty much every event the Lions went to, as well as the Lions going to Kansas State's Pro Day to watch Adrian Martinez throw. He was very clearly a player the Lions had a ton of interest in from the very beginning, and I do think he will return as the third quarterback. There's not really too many players competing for that role. Obviously, Jared Goff is your quarterback one. Obviously, Teddy Bridgewater is your QB2. But with Hendon Hooker being on the NFI list to start the season and likely missing the entirety of his rookie season, with Nate Sudfeld likely going on IR after tearing his ACL in the final preseason game, there isn't another quarterback even close to the roster that knows the playbook, that has chemistry with any of the players, whereas any reps with the first team in order to go in sub in if that third quarterback, that third emergency quarterback is available. Now, Adrian Martinez, I think, won't get picked up off waivers. He doesn't seem to be a guy that a lot of teams had interest in, but the Lions very clearly liked him. I think he'll either return to the practice squad or be that technically 54th member of the team as that emergency third quarterback that will not count against the roster. That new rule this year, having that extra quarterback slot, I believe, and really the only option is to give that spot to Adrian Martinez. So no surprise that he's not necessarily on the active roster, but I would be surprised if the Lions go out and try to get somebody else as opposed to returning Adrian Martinez for your emergency third string QB. Now, the Detroit Lions have 49 minutes to slim this roster down, and I will be looking to see if we can find any breaking news. And of course, we can update as we go along. But as of right now, that is the most up-to-date news that we do have. It does seem like Starling Thomas as well as Stephen Gilmore are both going to make the roster even after Mosley is activated from the PUP list. So that's a very good thing. Obviously, Chase Lucas was officially cut. I don't actually have him on here, but cornerback Chase Lucas was waived last night. Chase Lucas was officially waived last night. Again, a player I think the Lions are going to bring back, just not a player that I think necessarily was good enough to make the active roster right away. He's a guy that, played a lot in the slot, was kind of a mostly slot cornerback for the Detroit Lions in the preseason. Got beat quite a few times, but did make a couple big plays here and there, including the interception versus the Carolina Panthers. Played much better in week 3 of the preseason than he did in week 1. He got beat multiple times in week 1, which could have been his downfall, but I think the Lions like his leadership. They like what he does on the back end of the secondary. I think he will return to the practice squad, assuming he doesn't get taken by somebody else first. Is the leash short on Patterson? Those 50-plus yarders win and lose games down the wire. I'm not confident he will consistent and confident from long range. I'm not sure. Obviously, I'm not there, right? I'm not necessarily in the Lions locker room to know how short the leash actually is, but at this point, it is very up in the air, right? Obviously, Riley Patterson was cut last year in favor for a player that could potentially kick longer field goals. I think the Lions want a player with a little bit more range, but if Riley Patterson's more consistent from inside the 50, I'll take the guy that hits from inside 50 almost every time as opposed to the off chance that you need a 50-plus yard game-winning field goal. Because, yeah, that does happen, and that can lead to win and losses, but you're going to lose a lot more games with an inconsistent deep kicker than you're going to lose with a short yardage accurate kicker that's going to hit all of his kicks throughout the game and might just not have the leg for the big kick at the end. Solution to that, don't have it come down to a 50-plus yard game-winning field goal. Obviously, much easier said than done. How many are we down to now? The Lions started at 90, and that would make it 89, 88, 87, 86, 85, 84, 83, 82, 81, 80, 79, 78, 77, 76, 75, 74, 73, and 72 players on the roster, meaning somebody's going to have to do some math, but that brings us down to 72 players. It's hard to do math and talk at the same time. So somebody let me know down in the comments what that leaves us with. But that leaves us with quite a few players left to go with just over 45 minutes left. Yep, Parker Romo has officially been waived. Unless I'm missing something, and I do not believe that I am, Detroit Lions will continue to just search up and down this board. 19 left. All right, fantastic. That was a number I was close to. Yeah, it seems as though the Detroit Lions are, working their way down. They're probably going to cut a bunch of people right at like 359. They're going to probably take this down all the way to the wire. There's not many people the Detroit Lions have an easy job cutting, so it's going to be a really tough process. But this is really, really exciting. A huge news, Detroit Lions defense. I don't think anyone was expecting Mosley to be back. I was absolutely expecting Mosley to be back for the start of the season, but he is officially ready for week 1 versus the Chiefs. I don't know if he's going to start, but just because he hasn't played in the preseason, right, hasn't played practice reps or anything like that, but I do think he will make an impact, if not even start alongside Cam Sutton on the boundary for the Detroit Lions. Now, what do we have to talk about? Not a whole lot, right? The Detroit Lions probably aren't going to cut too many players until right at the deadline. We can take a look at the roster, though, and just kind of see Detroit Lions depth chart. We'll go to ESPN because they seem to have a pretty good layout. Like I said, Hendon Hooker's out. Adrian Martinez has officially been cut already. Of course, Nate Sudfeld is on the IR list at this point. Looking at running backs, I think that Jamar Jefferson could still get cut, or it could be Benny Snell. I think one of them will get cut and put to the practice squad, while one will be the Detroit Lions' 4th running back. For the wide receiving core, just kind of going through it, obviously Amon-Ra's here. Jamison Williams doesn't count until he's back from suspension. Marvin Jones is on the roster, as is Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond. I think Antoine Green very much did enough to make the active roster. He was great in week 3, was good throughout practices all offseason, as was Chase Cota. Chase Cota was really, really good all year for the Detroit Lions, all offseason, all preseason. He was really, really good. He made some big plays, led the Detroit Lions in receptions throughout the 3 weeks of the preseason. And I think he did enough to make the roster. Unfortunately, leaving Maurice Alexander to go back to the practice squad. He is a player that is a really good kick and punt returner, a really solid deep threat, but doesn't really bring a whole lot to the table that Khalif Raymond doesn't already bring. Khalif Raymond is a better returner. Khalif Raymond is a better deep man. And I think that Maurice Alexander is a great depth piece. He's a great practice squad player and a great preseason guy. But unfortunately, he doesn't quite bring size like Chase Cota. I think the things that he does bring to the roster doesn't quite work with people that are already on the roster. I think Khalif Raymond and Antoine Green already bring everything that Maurice Alexander values to this roster. Now, tight end, Sam Laporta, Brock Wright, and James Mitchell are the only 3 on the roster. Daryl Daniels is not on the roster anymore. He was cut a few days ago in the first round of cuts. Jason Kabinda is a very interesting option. Obviously, the fullback, not a very highly valued position anymore in the NFL, but is a player that the Lions very clearly like. He's a player that played in the preseason, was injured a lot last year, but came back and did have a role in the running game. I think the Lions are going to look to keep him as probably their 5th running back or 5th running back position, right? He's a guy that the Lions love to have. He's a really good locker room guy, and he's a guy that continues to just be a good team member and contribute to the team in positive ways almost every single week. Now, we have talked about the offensive line. This is not super up to date. So let's see if we can find a better one. Maybe our lads will have a better look. Try to close that. Not incredibly up to date, but I think is a little bit better than what we were working with. That is okay. So the Detroit Lions, we'll zoom in a little bit. Offensive linemen, obviously Taylor Decker, like I said, Jonah Jackson, Glasgow, Ragnow, and Sewell are all going to make the team, as is Halapaloi Vaitai. I do believe that Awaska has been cut, as has Max Percher. Ryan Swoboda has been cut, I know for a fact, as has Cecil Brad and Connor Galvin. That leaves the Detroit Lions with just Matt Nelson, Halapaloi Vaitai, and Colby Sorsdale as their depth offensive linemen. I don't see any of them getting cut anytime soon, so I think for the most part, the offense is pretty solid. The offense is pretty set in its ways. If Daniel Darrell has not been cut yet, I do think he will be, and other than that, I think Maurice Alexander is probably the only other guy on offense the Detroit Lions are going to look to get rid of, with, of course, Benny Snell or Jamar Jefferson joining the group. Defense, though, is probably where you're going to see quite a few players get the cut. Now, John Kaminsky is going to make the team, as is Josh Pascal. Isaiah Buggs, Broderick Martin, I think even Benito Jones is going to make this roster. Benito Jones was a really underrated pass rusher for the Detroit Lions interior last year, and for the most part, was really good. He even had a sack in the preseason in the limited time that he got. I think if he was more on the chopping block, we would have seen him a lot more in the preseason, but played a lot in the beginning and ended up sitting out a majority of the second half of most games. Now, Chris Smith and Corey Durden are both players that I think could be on the chopping block. Corey Durden, I thought, had a very, very impressive preseason. He had a lot of pressures as a guy from the interior. He had a lot of pressures for a guy that was an undrafted rookie free agent and didn't get very much time in the preseason. But like I said, with Aleem McNeil, with Isaiah Buggs, with Broderick Martin, with Levi Onwuzurike, and Benito Jones, I think it's going to be really hard to warrant keeping 6 interior defensive linemen on top of probably these 6 or 7 edge rushers. That's a lot of position. That's a lot of spots to put into the defensive line. And I think Corey Durden is going to be pretty safe being moved to the practice squad, as is Chris Smith. Didn't have quite the impact in the games, but had a couple of nice plays and had a very solid rookie mini camp as well. I think both of them will end up making the practice squad roster, but I think Corey Durden has a very, very small chance of making the active roster. However, like I said, with the depth at that position right now, I think it is highly unlikely that the UDFA ends up making it all the way. Aiden Hutchinson is, of course, going to make this roster, as is, I think, Romeo Okwara does. I don't think he's necessarily a surefire thing, right? Just as Julian Okwara is not a surefire thing to make this roster, but I do think one of the Okwara brothers will make it, and one of them will either get traded or will be released. I don't think the Lions are going to carry 7 edge rushers. As much as I want them to, as much as I want every edge rusher on this team to stay, everybody from Hutchinson, the Okwara brothers, to Charles Harris, to James Houston, Kaminsky and Pascal as well, I don't think the Lions are going to carry 7 to 8 edge rushers because, again, that's just a lot of talent. That's a lot of roster spots to take up for guys that aren't going to play, right? Guys that you get 2, maybe 3 on the field at a time. It's hard to warrant keeping 8 of those guys when you could use a roster spot like that on another really young, talented player that's going to get a little bit more playing time and have a larger impact on the team. Moving on to the linebackers, Alex Anzalone is, of course, going to make it, as is Derek Barnes. Those 2 players might even start at the linebacker position, but that is still up to the Detroit Lions coaching staff. Malcolm Rodriguez, I would feel very confident saying he will make the roster, as, of course, 100% will Jack Campbell. Both of them had very good preseasons, and I think these 4 in particular, Anzalone, Rodriguez, Campbell, and Barnes, will all make the active roster, leaving a couple players on the chopping block. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, I thought, was really good, had some good blitz opportunities, had some good coverage reps, and really, for the 5th linebacker, I think showed enough to make the roster if the Lions are willing to hold 5. The Lions are a team that don't traditionally, under Dan Campbell, use a ton of linebackers. They like to sit in nickel a lot, meaning they have 5 DBs on the field and only 2 linebackers at a time. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, I think, was good enough and is a good enough special teams player to stay on the active roster or stay on the practice squad, but it really is going to come down to how much of this roster do you want to devote to linebackers that probably aren't going to see the defense itself. Anthony Pittman, again, is the 6th linebacker on this team. I don't think outplayed Jalen Reeves-Maybin. At best, is going to be your linebacker 6. Is a very good special teams guy, just like JRM, but you can't warrant keeping 6 linebackers on the roster for the 2 of them to be special team aces. One of them has to go and one of them has to stay. I think Jalen Reeves-Maybin will be the one to stay if that is the case. Trevor Nowaski, a player that I actually thought had a very impressive preseason, wasn't the best in coverage, but got to tackles very quickly, closed down space very quickly, and was a very solid tackler. He's a guy that I think will very much continue to stick with the Detroit Lions. I think he has a very good, work ethic. I think he has a very good presence on the defense. He's a very solid tackler, and of course did make the huge fumble for touchback for the Detroit Lions with the Carolina Panthers game a few nights ago. Have a trade happened yet? A trade has not happened yet to my knowledge. I don't believe the Lions have traded anybody here. Like I said, I will continue to look. If somebody does get traded, obviously let me know. I'd be very curious to see anything happening. I'd be very, very excited to be the first one to break the news. But as far as I know, nobody has been traded yet, and nobody from the Detroit Lions roster has officially been cut since this morning. I think it's very likely the Detroit Lions are going to take it down to the wire, although a trade could come for Julian or Romeo Okwara at some point. We are just going to have to wait and see. Taking a look at the secondary, Emmanuel Mosley was officially lifted from the PUP list today. He's going to make the roster. Cam Sutton's going to make the roster. CJ Gardner-Johnson's going to make the roster. Brian Branch is going to make the roster. Jerry Jacobs is going to make the roster. That right there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defensive backs that are already on the team. I do think that Starling Thomas or Stephen Gilmore will make the roster, potentially both. I think that there's room for both, but I think, unfortunately, one of them is going to have to go. And based off the preseason, Stephen Gilmore was the better cornerback. Stephen Gilmore forced more turnovers. Stephen Gilmore was in better coverage. Stephen Gilmore didn't get beat as often. Stephen Gilmore was genuinely a very, very strong candidate. And again, it might not come down to who the better player is, but who made the most noise in the preseason, right? Starling Thomas was never talked about. Starling Thomas never made a massive play in the preseason, even though he was a sneaky good cornerback, kind of like Jerry Jacobs has been. He didn't make the big plays, right? He wasn't tweeted about. He wasn't marketed on NFL Network. He wasn't talked about by the media, meaning he's flying under the radar, and there's a lesser chance that he gets stolen away than there is that Stephen Gilmore gets carried away, right? There's a better chance that nobody's heard of Starling Thomas since UDFA versus a player that is obviously heard of Stephen Gilmore, younger brother of Stephon Gilmore, former Defensive Player of the Year, that tweets about him a lot. The NFL Network has talked about Stephen Gilmore. A lot of people, a lot of media have talked about Stephen Gilmore. And if he is released, I think there's a better chance that it's heard about from him and he gets signed away than it is Starling Thomas. I do think Will Harris will make the roster as well, despite what a lot of people want to see. Will Harris is probably here to stay. Will Harris is a versatile cornerback. He is a versatile DB. He is a guy that the Lions like having around. Like it or not, he is a guy that is here to stay for the time being and is probably going to be here for the active roster, meaning likely Khalil Dorsey, I would assume, is gone. Khalil Dorsey, I don't think will make this roster, but I do think at least one of the UDFA corners, if not both, will make the roster as well. I could see the Detroit Lions holding seven cornerbacks, if not even 8. I think the secondary is a strength of this team. And when you go light at linebacker, it gives you the luxury to go a little bit heavier somewhere else. Taking a look at safeties, I think Tracy Walker's fine on the roster. He's going to stay, as is Kirby Joseph. Iviatu Malafanu and Brady Breeze could both get cut, right, to make room for either Brandon Joseph or Brian Branch. But I'm not entirely sure how heavy the Lions are going to go at defensive back. They could hold 4 or 5 safeties, right? Those could be Kirby and Walker and Johnson and Branch and Iffy. They could hold on to, if they want to consider Brian Branch and Gardner Johnson nickelbacks, they could hold on to Kirby and Tracy and Iffy and Brandon Joseph. It's really hard to tell what they value at the defensive back position because I don't know who they consider a cornerback. I'm not sure who they consider a safety. Really, it goes back and forth, and obviously they're all going to be used in different roles. But as of right now, it's just kind of hard to tell how many safeties they want to keep, who they want to designate as safety versus corner. I think that's going to really dictate how this is going to go. Anybody cut since Chase Lucas? Like I said, these are the cuts that I know for a fact about right now. Adrian Martinez was waived this morning. Parker Romo was waived this morning. Connor Galvin was waived last night with Dylan Drummond. Those are the most recent ones. And then, of course, you have the big one from a couple of days ago. Khalil Dorsey is a 5'8 cornerback. I don't think he makes it. I don't think he does either, but I wouldn't be surprised if he returns to the practice squad because he's a guy that, again, kind of has that really good attitude the Detroit Lions like and could very much return for that to be the case. This is what I was talking about earlier with Chris Jones. Interdivisional trade, the Kansas City Chiefs still holding out. Chris Jones still holding out on the Kansas City Chiefs as they trade a 6th-round pick for Las Vegas defensive tackle Neil Farrell. Again, maybe a sign that Chris Jones isn't playing. He said he's willing to hold out until week 8. He's already been fined $1.8 million. He's kind of in this for the long haul at this point. He's not going to back out now. So unless the Kansas City Chiefs can really figure something out over the next couple of days, there's a chance that either Chris Jones isn't in shape for week 1 or flat out isn't playing for the Chiefs in week 1. Now, that being said, I do hope that if he's not playing for the Chiefs, I hope he doesn't go to the Bears. I don't know how legitimate the trade talks with the Bears are, but I definitely don't want to see the Bears trading for Chris Jones. He's a very good defensive tackle, arguably top 2 in the NFL. And, it's obviously not a great situation if the Bears get him. Trade Evan McPherson for a 2024 2nd-round pick. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. All right, let's see. Emmanuel Moseley is huge. Emmanuel Moseley is big news. I know the Kansas City Chiefs don't have too many top-tier wide receivers, but they have a lot of guys, and they get schemed open very, very well. And honestly, I'm more excited for Emmanuel Moseley to go up against DK Metcalf in week 2 because the last time those two battled, they went back and forth. Emmanuel Moseley won quite a few of those battles. And I do think that he is the best equipped player on our secondary to go toe-to-toe with DK in week 2. So that I think is a very big get for the Detroit Lions, officially having their free agent cornerback return to the active roster. A lot of people thought he wasn't going to play. A lot of people already counted him out for the season, but he is officially back on the roster and officially ready to go for week 1. Of course, still having a couple days before that kicks off as well. The Bears are releasing Nathan Peterman. They do want him back on the practice squad. That makes sense. Tyler Bagent, I believe is his name. Bagnet. It was really good in the preseason. And it makes no surprise to me that he made it as the second string, right? A lot cheaper than Walker and a lot better than the guy that they just cut, whose name is already escaping me. Nathan Peterman. Yeah, played better than Nathan Peterman, is cheaper than Walker. All of a sudden, you have your backup quarterback too. I think he's capable of winning games for them and was pretty solid. And, we can see that he is currently the quarterback. The Lions have 13 cuts left. 13 cuts to go in the next 30 minutes. I just want to see if I've missed anybody. We've talked about latest roster cuts. So Darrell Daniels was actually cut, looks like today, as was unfortunately Brandon Joseph. Brandon Joseph is a player that I really liked in this preseason. He's a player that I think the Lions are going to bring back, but unfortunately will not make the active roster this time around. Hendon Hooker placed on NFL list, Dylan Drummond, Connor Galvin, Adrian Martinez, Ryan Swoboda, Kayota Owaska, Chase Lucas are all out. Jameson Williams being placed on the reserve suspended list, as is all the players that were cut a few nights ago. So, for anybody asking for the most recent updates, looks like Darrell Daniels was officially cut by the Detroit Lions, leaving them officially with just 3 tight ends, as was Parker Romo. I did miss the Brandon Joseph cut, but that does make quite a bit of sense. That either means that Ifeatu Melifonwu was going to be healthy, or maybe Brady Breeze is good enough to make the roster this time around. I think one of them is going to make it. I would put my money on Ifeatu if he's healthy, but Ifeatu is very rarely healthy on this team. I think he's a good player when he's healthy. He's a good player when he's playing, but unfortunately, with the best ability being availability, Ifeatu Melifonwu has been lacking that ability for several seasons in a row. Let's see, anything else happening? Again, the Lions have 13 cuts in the next 28 minutes, and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about a couple of players the Lions might be interested in, and then we will move it and end the stream. Trade Matt Prater to the Lions. Unfortunately, I don't think that is going to necessarily happen. Trade here, though, trading O-lineman Kendrick Green to the Texans. Green was a former 3rd-round pick. Again, offensive line depth is very valuable right now in the NFL, and a lot of teams don't have it. And if you do have it, you could potentially have yourself a trade partner or a couple extra picks in your back pocket. September 7th. I'm excited. I'm so ready for football to kick off, and I'm really excited to watch this team play the Kansas City Chiefs. Trey Sermon was released by the Philadelphia Eagles. Could be an interesting get for the Detroit Lions if they want somebody who I think is very much capable, kind of in the mold of a Jamar Jefferson as far as play style. You like Brady Breeze better. I like Ifeatu Melifonwu better. I think he has better range. I think he has better ball skills. Again, the injury concerns is not great, but Ifeatu Melifonwu was really, really good at special teams in the preseason. So if nothing else, he can contribute there. Plus, like I said, I think he's a very capable safety when healthy. We just got to consider the fact that Ifeatu Melifonwu sometimes isn't always healthy. Eli Ricks went off in his first preseason, fighting for a roster spot after going undrafted. Fair enough. The Chiefs have relieved 2 backup quarterbacks. So do they have one right now, or are they just sitting with Patrick Mahomes? Eli Ricks was really good. I thought Eli Ricks was going to be a top 100 pick. He was really, really good at Alabama when he was healthy. I don't know if he's going to stay healthy, but the Eagles got a very good steal in undrafted free agency. Let us see. What else is happening? Yeah. So Tyson Bagnet and Justin Fields are going to be the 2 quarterbacks for the Chicago Bears. Miami is releasing Chosen Anderson. Not a huge shock, but good to know. Cost the Lions $1.232 million to keep Harris on the roster, while it cost them $2.5 to release him. That's another reason that I think he stayed. If it's going to cost you more money to release a veteran, versatile defensive back as opposed to just keeping him as your cornerback 6, you just keep him, right? It's going to cost you a lot less money in the long run to replace, Stephen Gilmore or Starling Thomas than it is to replace Will Harris. So it is, a money thing as well. That's something we have to keep in mind is money does play a factor in these decisions, and money is a big part of why Will Harris is still on the roster. Amazing story continues as Chiefs wide receiver Justin Ross has made the team. I'm not necessarily surprised. He seemed to have a really good preseason and great camp. I'm really happy for him because he's a guy, again, I really liked as a draft prospect. Obviously, the injury concerns were there, but when he's on the field, he's a very talented player. Chiefs release quarterback Shane Buechele and Chris Oladukin. Maybe. If I said it wrong, I do apologize. Per league sources, very interesting roster decisions and raise questions what their plan is behind Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. If that is the only depth quarterback that they have, I think it's a very interesting thing to consider. I don't know if they still have Chad Henne or not, but it does seem like, I can't remember who it was, but at least against the Saints, it seemed like one of their backup quarterbacks was having a really good day. So, again, kind of an interesting thing to keep an eye on. We'll see what happens with the backup situation in Kansas City. Obviously, the odds of Patrick Mahomes getting hurt before week 1 are very slim, but you never know what's going to happen. Let's see. We're not talking about baseball. Amani Oruwariye was released by the Giants. The former Detroit Lion had 6 interceptions just 2 seasons ago. Yeah, Amani Oruwariye fall from grace, unfortunately. He could be a guy that the Lions bring back. He's a guy that I still root for. I love Amani Oruwariye. He could be a practice squad player the Lions look to bring back. If nothing else, he does have some ball skills. Could come back as a practice squad guy with former experience, guy with 6 interceptions, like he said, just 2 seasons ago. But the fall from grace. Amani Oruwariye just seemed to not have it last season. And yeah, I think 2 seasons ago he was a little bit lucky, right? Had quite a few overthrows that went right into his hands, but he made a couple really nice plays as well. The diving interception versus Arizona was a great play by the defensive back, and that Amani Oruwariye just isn't there anymore. Name a duo who's going off this season. Hutchinson and Houston are going to be really, really good this season, I hope. Bears pick him up. Who is this going to be? Amani Oruwariye. Oh, that would be probably a good thing for the Detroit Lions. Like I said, Amani, love Amani. I'll always root for Amani unless he goes to a rival, but he isn't the same player anymore. I don't know what happened to him. He went from being a top 15 quarterback to just not being there as much. Hello, how are you doing today? Good to see you in here. And good to see 53 people in here. A really good number for roster cut down day. I don't know if I'm the only one streaming it, if I'm the only one talking about it, but it's good to see 55 people in the building and get some of that engagement up. If you have not subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe. And if you have not liked the video yet, make sure you go down and do that as well. Helps the channel out a ton. And we're always looking to grow this community. We are just under 60 away from 3,000 subscribers. So if you want to help us get there and you have not subscribed yet, please make sure to go down and do so soon. Let's see. Assuming Gilmore is gone, that's not good. With what news? That would not be good if Stephen Gilmore has to make the team. He has to. He played too well this preseason not to get here. Stephen Gilmore. Could lose him to waiver. I haven't seen anything yet about Stephen Gilmore being cut or waived or anything like that. So we're going to see. He had, 4 pass defended and a huge PFF grade in the preseason. I don't see the Lions letting him go. I don't see them getting rid of a depth quality cornerback like Stephen Gilmore was. It just wouldn't make sense from a team building standpoint, right? You can't preach, everybody has a job, everybody's competing, everybody's doing this just to not keep your best, arguably your best defensive back of the preseason on the roster. Mosley was taken off the PUP list. That was a couple minutes ago, about an hour ago almost, and that's really, really good news for the Detroit Lions. So yeah, great news. He's going to be ready for week 1. I also hope he stays. I really, really hope that Stephen Gilmore stays on the roster, remains a member of the Detroit Lions for a very, very long time. Because honestly, he deserved it. He was good in a legitimately really, really good quarterback. And if he gets cut, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think there's a lot more risk of him getting stolen away than there is a guy like Starling Thomas. So we will wait and see. But I've been big on Stephen Gilmore since he was signed out of UDFA. I was big on him at Marshall. I was big on him as an undrafted rookie. And obviously, he showed out enough in the preseason for himself to be great. Not a whole lot. The Lions have 20 minutes to make, I believe, 12 more cuts. And I'm not entirely sure who they're going to be cutting because they're running out of camp bodies. They're getting into the territory of really talented players, guys that can make the roster, but aren't going to end up making the Detroit Lions roster. We need some breaking news to talk about. We need some more cuts. We need some more things to talk about. NFL teams called about trading for Patriots wide receiver Kendrick Bourne, but we're told he's not being traded. What do you think we'll do kicking wise? Unless there's a great opportunity, right? Unless there is a player that just stands out and is like, hey, we need that guy, like a starting caliber kicker that's on the trade block. I really don't believe that we're going to do anything with our kicking situation. I think they trust Riley Patterson enough to get them through games. Obviously, Riley Patterson, a starting kicker for a playoff team last year. He's a good kicker. He's a very consistent kicker. He doesn't have the range that some of the elite kickers do. But again, like I said, if you're kicking field goals, how many 50-plus yard field goals are you kicking a season? A couple? And yeah, they're very big field goals. But if your guy can hit within 40, that is not an easy thing to do. And I saw earlier, I was talking with somebody and they said, it's a lot harder, a lot easier to get worse at kicking than it is to get better, right? It's kind of like what Brad Holmes said about the quarterback, right? It's really easy to downgrade from your quarterback. It's really hard to upgrade from your quarterback. And I think that's the same way with kicker, right? You have a guy that's consistent with inside the 50. You have somebody that is really good with short yardage kicks, very consistent, very accurate. Yeah, you might get somebody that has more range, but if they can't hit from inside 40 consistently, that's going to put you in a hole a lot quicker than a missed 50-plus yard field goal is going to do. Kicking game will rely on more fourth down attempts. I don't know. We'll see. The Lions went for it a lot on fourth down early in the season and kind of got better at that as the season went on. So we'll see what their philosophy is next year, but we could potentially see more 50-yard or more fourth down conversions. I think Snell gets cut and we keep Reynolds at RB. Reynolds, I think, is a very, very much on the roster. I don't think there's any question that our RB3 is on the cutting block, but like I said, I think it's between him and Jamar Jefferson as to who is going to be that last running back to be released and potentially signed to the practice squad. Anything interesting? Come on, Lions. I know you got more cuts to do. I know you got more things to put on our plate. Let's go. I'll tell you what, Lucas did not make that decision easy for the Lions at all. Hope he makes it back. I do too. I really hope that he makes it back. DeMar Hamlin has officially made the 53-man roster. I think, at least I assumed that he was going to. But good to know that he is officially back. Another kicking trade. The Patriots are trading Nick Folk to the Titans. That's 2 kickers today that the Lions probably had interest in. But I don't think they're necessarily sweating Riley Patterson, but I do think they're doing their due diligence, right? They're like, hey, we have a guy that's really good at this, but if it comes down to a 50-yard field goal, I'm not sure how we feel about it. So I think they're doing their due diligence. They're check-in, and we could see. Robbie Gould is out there. He is out there, but I think he's hurt, isn't he? I thought Robbie Gould got injured in the preseason. I don't know if I want an injured kicker on the team, right? Obviously, he'll heal and get better, but we'll see. Waves Travis Bell, 7th-round pick, is last year in draft favorite by polls. Big surprise. Interesting cut by the Bears. 70 people now in the room. If you have not liked the video, none of you not subscribed to the channel yet, go down below and do that. Just a quick little promo for me. We are 58 away 58 away from 3,000 subscribers. So if you have not done so yet, go out, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and of course, shout it out if you would like on Twitter, Instagram, promote this video so more people get in here so we can have more people talking about the Detroit Lions. What about Cade York? I think the fact that the Browns traded for a kicker tells you everything you need to know about Cade York. He's inconsistent. You do not give up on a kicker you drafted in the 4th round in 2 years unless they really, really struggled and you truly have no faith in them. Miami Dolphins are trading 2020 first-round pick Noah Igbenogany to the Dallas Cowboys for former second-round cornerback Kelvin Joseph. Interesting. New starting point for both players. Noah Igbenogany, I believe, had an interception last year off of Kenny Pickett. I can't say I know too much about Kelvin Joseph, but interesting that they do a player swap while they're trying to cut down on players. That seems like an odd thing to do. Obviously, you're looking to get rid of players and cut your roster down. So trading for a guy that hasn't played on your team yet just seems a little bit of an interesting thing to do. The Eagles trading for Albert O per sources, and of course they are. The Eagles are just building a super team over there. Another great tight end weapon for them in exchange for a 2025 6th-round pick. I think it's good value. I think that he's going to be better than a 6th-round pick would be on the Eagles to begin with. Would I want the Lions to make that trade? Probably not. And the Lions, he would come in and be the Lions tight end 4. It would make the decision a lot harder at other positions if Albert O was to come to the roster. But I think it's a good trade for the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that apparently liked him as a tight end, apparently needed a little tight end depth, and was willing to part ways with a 6th-round selection. Very interesting, but that does take him officially off of our trade block. Been hearing a lot about these Mike Evans rumors. What the take on this? Any hints of truth behind it? I honestly don't think our wide receiver room isn't as bad as people make it out to be. I don't think our wide receiving room is bad necessarily. I think it's hard to say because obviously they have Amon-Ra St. Brown, right, who's very good. They have Marvin Jones, who's very good. They have Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond, 4 wide receivers that are genuinely really good players, but none of them are really that X wide receiver, right? None of them, other than St. Brown, are going to line up and go for 1,000, 11, 1,200 yards on the boundary. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown could be fine on the boundary, but they don't have a 1,000-yard boundary wide receiver right now. Mike Evans is that player, but are you going to want to take on a large contract? Are you going to want to take on a large burden of Mike Evans in your locker room to bring in a potential wide receiver when I think Amon-Ra can go for 1,200. I think Marvin Jones can go for 5. I think Josh Reynolds can go for 5. I think Khalif Raymond can go for 7 to 8. I think that Antoine Green could go for a couple hundred. I think Chase Cota could give you 100 yards or so. Like, it's not a wide receiving core that has a superstar at the X, right? They don't have a DK Metcalf. They don't have a Justin Jefferson, a Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, but is a wide receiving core that's deep, is a wide receiving core that has good chemistry, is built off of timing, is built off of connection and chemistry. And I think throwing in a diva wide receiver, I think is fair to say. I think Mike Evans is a wide receiver that makes a lot of noise and has a lot of money going to his name. Isn't the best move. I don't think that there's any realism to the fact or to the rumors that they're going to trade for him. I really just don't see it. Could the Buccaneers be selling him? Absolutely. Could the Detroit Lions be buyers in that sale? I doubt it. Ravens released Melvin Gordon. I don't think Melvin Gordon is a great fit for any team right now. He's kind of seems to be on his last legs, seems to be kind of, just on a slow decline towards the end of his career. Obviously still fighting for a roster spot, but he's not the Melvin Gordon he was at Wisconsin. He's not the Melvin Gordon he was with the Los Angeles Chargers. He's not the Melvin Gordon that's going to rush for 1,000 yards anymore. He's a depth running back and a veteran depth running back at that. I think there's a lot of running backs better than him on the roster. I would take Craig Reynolds over him. I might even take Jamar Jefferson over him because they're younger. They got fresher legs. And the Lions, I don't think they need another running back unless a talented young one comes about. But Melvin Gordon does not fit the young qualifications of that spot. Bears are reportedly Chicago Bears Darnold is reportedly a trade candidate. I don't know why I couldn't read that for a second. It just took me a minute. I don't believe this. I really, really don't believe this because it just doesn't make sense, right? Everybody talks about how Justin Fields finally has weapons, and all of a sudden you're gonna cut not necessarily his biggest weapon, right? I don't think Darnell Mooney's like that great. He's a lot like Khalif Raymond, right? He could be your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, get you 600-700 yards, but it just doesn't make sense to trade him unless it's a part of a package deal. And I just don't think that they're gonna do that. Trade for Cade York. Please do not trade for Cade York. Cade York is super inconsistent. Cade York is just not a good kicker. Like I said, if the Browns are willing to move on from a guy they drafted 2 seasons ago and trade for a kicker while doing it, I think that tells you everything you need to know about Cade York. You want to bring him in for a tryout? Sure. But if you want to bring him on a practice squad because you think he can develop, maybe. But never, ever give up a draft pick for a kicker that was cut. The Lions reportedly replacing Benny Snell. Looks like Craig Reynolds has won the RB3 job. Yep. And it looks as though Jamar Jefferson has likely won the RB4 role unless he was cut as well, but I don't believe he has been. What's with the deal with James Houston? Had him playing in the fourth quarter of the preseason games. Punishment, not making the leap from year 1 to year 2. Now I'm reading your trade rumors. So we've talked about James Houston a little bit earlier, but I'll go back and kind of double down on what I said. I think James Houston is very much on the roster still. I think he's going to be a rotational pass rusher. He's going to be a pass rush specialist. And he's going to be a super efficient pass rusher for the Detroit Lions. But I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I think the Lions played him a lot in the preseason because they wanted to develop his abilities, right? Yeah, he's a pass rusher at heart. Yeah, he's going to be a pass rush specialist. I think they played him in the preseason because they wanted him to work on setting the edge. They wanted him to work on run defense. They wanted him to work on off-ball linebacker stuff to make him a more well-rounded linebacker, not necessarily to punish him for anything he did wrong. And James Houston, by all means, showed why he's a top-tier pass rusher is because – what did he have? Like 20-ish pressures in 3 games? Like, he was incredible this preseason as a pass rusher. So there's no chance that he's getting cut. I think there's a very limited chance that he gets traded. I think it was more to help develop James Houston well-roundedly. Right? I think, like I said, it's to work on the run stopping. It's to work on the pass coverage. Just to work on the off-ball stuff and working your way up to tackle in space. And those are things that James Houston admittedly has to work on, but I don't think they did it for a punishment. I don't think he's on the trade block. I don't think they were showing him off. I think they were genuinely trying to give James Houston as many reps as possible to develop himself into a more well-rounded player. I highly doubt he's getting traded. Highly doubt that he will not be on the roster because if he hits waivers, he's gone. If he's cut, he's gone. And honestly, I wouldn't trade him at all. Like, even if it was for a second round pick, I would have real trouble trading James Houston because, like I said last year, he outproduced all of the first round edge rushers. He was more efficient than every edge rusher that went in the first round last year. You don't find that guy in the 6th round, have that cheap deal, have that benefit just to trade him away for a draft pick that you don't know how it's going to turn out. So that's how I view it. I don't know where the trade allegations come from. Again, it's like Darnell Mooney, right? Why? What? Unless it's to upgrade a player, right? Unless it's like you trade Darnell Mooney as a part of a package for Chris Jones or whatever Bears fans are talking about, it doesn't make sense to get rid of him. Just like it doesn't make sense for the Detroit Lions to get rid of James Houston when they're in a win-now position, and James Houston can help them win now to continue to build a playoff-ready roster, building for the future. It doesn't make sense. I'm good. I'm having a great time on roster cutdown day. We have 7 minutes until the Detroit Lions officially declare their final 53. The most recent player that was cut was Benny Snell, but I expect many more to come out in the coming minutes. Yep, most recent one right here. Been very busy with school, been very busy with Lions stuff, but having a great time doing it all. Browns release Austin Watkins Jr. Looked special in the preseason. Someone will sign him. Maybe this is a Detroit Lions signing that is going to pop back up for them. Giants have waived Khalil Pimpleton, formerly of the Khalil Pimpleton, not Khalif. Khalil Pimpleton, formerly of the Detroit Lions preseason roster. 10 days away from NFL football officially kicking off in the regular season, and we are excited about that. But 10 minutes, or in 5 minutes even, we're going to know the Detroit Lions 53-man roster. I think they still have 10 players left to cut, 10 or 11. They're working their way down, but they're getting to the tough positions, right? Everybody left on the roster deserves a roster spot. I just want to say that right now. I think it's very interesting that a couple of guys in particular, I think it's very interesting that Corey Durden and Chris Smith have yet to be cut. I think it's very interesting that Trevor Nowaski has yet to be waived. Same thing with Thomas and Gilmore. We have yet to see, obviously, Coda get waived. We haven't seen Antoine Green get waived. I think he will make the roster. So who's the last 10 players that you cut, right? Durden and Smith are probably 1 and 2. Nowaski and Pittman are probably 3 and 4. Dorsey's 5, if I had to guess. No trades have happened yet to my knowledge. Like I said, if a trade happens, I will let you know. But up to this point, I don't believe so. I read that just said Jonathan Taylor, but I don't think Jonathan Taylor's been traded quite yet. Let's see. Let us take a look. Not seeing any trades. I'm not seeing any big moves. Obviously, Albert O was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles a little bit ago. That was kind of the only last massive trade. So what? You're looking at this Lions roster. Brady Breeze is 1. Probably Khalil Dorsey is 2. Nowaski and Pittman are 3 and 4. Durden and Smith are 5 and 6. You're going to have to cut probably Julian Okwara for 7. Maurice Alexander for 8. But who's going to be your last 2? Like, it's so difficult. It's a great problem to have, right? Obviously, not having depth or having too much depth that you're cutting quality players is a good problem to have in the NFL, but it certainly hurts. And it's very tough to make decisions. We have 3 minutes left. The Lions have a couple more players they need to release. And like I said, it's definitely gonna hurt no matter what. Looking more like Chris Jones will miss week 1. That would be phenomenal. Obviously, we all want to play the Chiefs at their best and beat the Chiefs at their best, but I will absolutely take a Chiefs team without Chris Jones. I don't think Will Harris is going to be released. I don't really see it personally. I really don't see him being cut. I really don't see him being cut. It would cost the Lions more money to cut Will Harris than it would to keep Will Harris. And like it or not, Will Harris is a fine cornerback, 5 or 6. He can make it in the NFL. Like I said, it would cost them almost $1 million more to cut Will Harris than it would to keep Will Harris. So we'll see. But I would be very, very surprised if the Lions were to cut him. I don't disagree that he's a bad cornerback, especially on the boundary, but at the end of the day, he's a versatile defensive back with 5 years of experience. He's cheaper than a lot of options. He'd be more expensive to cut than keep. There is no reason to get rid of Will Harris as opposed to making him your cornerback 6, right? As opposed to making him your third nickel back and potentially your third, box safety. Yeah, he's not going to start, but at the end of the day, the Lions trust him. The Lions like his versatility. The Lions love him as a locker room player. And at the end of the day, those things combined with his contract is going to be the reason he stays on the roster. Eagles cutting punter Aaron Sipos. Currently don't have a punter on the roster. That's an interesting one. he was pretty good. Former Lion tryout, I believe, and I think he even went through training camp and mini camp. Got beat out by Jack Fox, but from what I know, he's been a fairly good punter for the Eagles. So not totally sure what's going on there. 94 people already on the stream. Great to see everybody. If you, again, I just got to say it as a YouTuber. If you have not subscribed, please go out and do so. We are 45, 55 away from 3,000 subscribers on the channel. Well, go down, like the video if you haven't already. Obviously, you love the Lions content if you're here. Been streaming since we got on about 2:45. So about an hour and 15 minutes into this thing. And we're getting down to the limits. We're getting down to the end here of Detroit Lions roster cutdown day. But like I said, Aaron Sippo is a very interesting player to not have in. Let's see. Bears offensive line is kind of falling apart, which is great to see for the Lions. Obviously, don't wish injury on anybody, but, we appreciate the lack of depth at the Bears offensive line here. Let's keep, we don't care about, we want football. Come on. Cowboys take on former first rounder, add some depth. They don't really add depth. They got rid of another cornerback, so they more replaced the depth they've already had. But again, interesting trade. I don't know. Is a very interesting one. No deal. Indianapolis will not find what it feels a fair value for Jonathan Taylor. Is not an all-pro running back today, and it's not trading all-pro running back today. League sources. No matter what no trade materialized today, Taylor is expected to remain physically unable to perform. No, he didn't. Will Harris did not just get cut. There's no way. I don't believe you. I did see he got traded to the Eagles. That is something that I did see. There's no way. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I'm not gonna be totally against it because, like, I think there are better players on the team than Will Harris. I'm just saying from cut Jalen. For some reason, I thought that was Demario Davis for a second, and we hit 100 people on the live today. That might be a channel record. So great to have everybody here. 102. We're killing it today. I don't see Will Harris getting cut. Maybe you're just trying to will it into existence, but I'm not seeing it yet. I'm not seeing it. We'll keep looking. Jonathan Taylor not being traded makes sense. The deadline has passed for rosters to be established, but I think it'll take a little time longer, up to another 2 hours for the full list to be public. I'm not going to go for 2 hours. We'll stay on for a little bit. I don't have anything until 6 o'clock. So, we got time. We might even go for another hour if we have to. I don't have to go to recovery until 6 o'clock. We might just chill here and hang out and watch this roster cut down. So rosters are officially done. There's going to be a lot of news over the next couple hours coming out over who made it, who didn't make it, and who's going to be impacting the team. If Will Harris actually got cut, that would shock me. That would actually shock me. Cardinals head coach Jonathan Gannon, he won't name a week 1 starting quarterback, maintain competitive advantage. Interesting. We can trade a wide receiver for the Lions. We could, but I don't think we will. I doubt the Lions are going to trade for any wide receivers. Again, pretty deep roster for the Detroit Lions, pretty deep wide receiving core. I don't think they need too many more depth wide receivers. They need a star, and they're not going to get a star here. We making any trades? Not as of yet. There's still rumors that Julian Okwara has some interest. I wouldn't be surprised if Romeo Okwara had a little interest. Last time he played a full season at 10 sacks. It's on news. Will Harris has refused to turn in his playbook and leave the facility. I think you're just trying to speak it into existence. 49ers releasing Anthony Miller. He could be an interesting player to look at if the Lions want to add wide receiver depth. Commanders' Ron Rivera admitted that he wasn't aware how good Sam Howell was throughout the 2022 season or how he would have started him sooner. That's pretty sad as a head coach. I won't lie. That's pretty bad. Let's keep scrolling. Austin Watkins, I've heard, was really good in the preseason, but we'll see. Led the league in preseason receiving yards. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets signed by the Lions. The Lions love them wide receivers. especially big guys that can run. So we'll see. Joshua Dobbs and Clayton Tune, Cardinals QB room taking shape after McCoy cut. Man, the Cardinals are in a situation. They, according to Jonathan Gannon, they want to maintain a competitive advantage, which I guess kind of makes sense. But like, how do you train for Joshua Dobbs versus Clayton Tune? Like, neither one's really played very much before. Like, how are you going to game plan for two players that have never really started in the NFL before? I feel like regardless of who you have, it's going to be pretty hard to game plan for them, but we'll see. Or you could just game plan for both. They're both backup quarterbacks starting, so it's not that incredible. I get the kicking situation is frustrating, and Holmes possibly deserves some criticism for that spot. But I ask, where are these great kickers he's supposed to? That's a great point. There's not too many great kickers out there. If they're a great kicker, they're on a roster, right? Justin Tucker is not falling into free agency. So, yeah, the Cardinals are a 2-15 team at best. I think at best they're 3-14. You know, they play the Rams twice. They play, I don't know who they play, but they could probably win a couple. David Montgomery is incredible. Just wanted to let you know that. I think, yeah, last year a lot of people were down on a couple teams, and I was, kind of the one that was like, hey, don't sleep on Seattle. I did say don't sleep on Chicago. Obviously, I was wrong about that one, but the Cardinals, there's no way they're any good, right? Like, they traded away Isaiah Simmons. Like, they have a head coach that already seems kind of Matt Patricia-y to me. It just, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a winning formula for them. I wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan Gannon was out in week one, imagine. In year one, they just don't seem like they're starting a brand new expansion franchise is kind of what it seems like. That's my thinking, honestly. Who's who for kickers available for trade? Like, if you have a good kicker, you're not trading them away. And there aren't too many backup kickers that are playing very well, right? If they're a backup kicker, they're a backup kicker for a reason. The NFL needs kickers. So if there's a good kicker out there, they're probably on a roster. Where's the final 53? Like we said, the roster has been officially completed, but it might take an hour or so for news to officially come out. It might take a little bit of time for news to break and for it to be communicated properly from the NFL to the media. But the roster is officially complete. We just might not know the complete roster until about 5 o'clock, which is okay. We have time until 5 o'clock, so we might just hang out here. I just continue to stream and continue to do our thing. But it is done. We just don't know yet what is going on. Broncos trading Will Lutz. That would have been a good one, but Brad Holmes already traded for a kicker this offseason, so we'll see what happens. I don't think Brad Holmes is going to trade for a kicker. If there's one out there for waiver, maybe, but I don't know. I don't see it happening. I think both the Chiefs and Lions can score 30-plus on opening night. I think they'll both score high. I really think that it'll be a high-scoring game. The Lions defense, I trust a lot more than the Kansas City Chiefs defense, especially without Chris Jones, but it's really, really hard to bet against Patrick Mahomes. It's really, really difficult to look at Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes in the reigning Super Bowl champions and be like, yeah, I'm going to bet against them with the Detroit Lions, right? As much as I love the Lions, and I do obviously love my Lions, it's really hard to bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in any game, especially a game that they have had several weeks to prepare for. That's not player news. I agree. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Some people in the beginning of the stream disagreed with my takes, and they told me to give up or try harder. So I appreciate the nice comment. I appreciate that. Justin Ross has made the Kansas City Chiefs roster. He's a good wide receiver, guys. He played at Clemson, obviously had a great freshman year, had a broken neck, I think, in his sophomore year. But he's such a talented, good young player. He really, really is. I'm taking the Lions and the 6.5 plus over long shot of the Lions. I think 6.5 is not a bad value for the Lions. The Lions they always seem to be in really tight games. So even if they lose, I don't know if they're going to lose by a full touchdown. A full touchdown seems like a lot of room for the Lions to beat the spread. So not that I'm allowed to sports bet. I just want to make that very clear to the NCAA. I'm not allowed to sports bet. But if I was allowed to sports bet, I think I'd take the Lions at 6.5. I think they'll keep it closer than that. And like I said, they might even have a dark horse chance of winning. But I would absolutely bet Lions if it's 6.5. New York Jets, Sauce Gardner for his preseason action. Sauce Gardner is phenomenal. Like it happens. He's a great player. Yeah, looking forward to Kansas City. It's gonna be real interesting. It's gonna be really, really interesting. Chiefs depth chart. We'll take a look at it. We'll kind of compare the rosters really quickly. Patrick Mahomes is obviously Patrick Mahomes. Pacheco, McKinnon, and Edwards-Helaire are all, I think, really good running backs. I don't know if I'm really necessarily worried about any of them taking over a game, but Isaiah Pacheco can certainly have some big games and can certainly hurt you on the ground. Travis Kelce is the big one. I don't know how we're going to stop Travis Kelce, but we're going to find a way. Whether it's Jack Campbell, the big linebacker on him, whether it's Tracy Walker on him, who, last time actually didn't do too bad. I don't know if you're going to put – it's hard because Travis Kelce's big enough for linebackers and he's fast enough for safeties where it's like, safeties are too small, linebackers are too slow. How on earth do you cover Travis Kelce, right? That's going to be the big one. I think our secondary can handle Kadarius Toney, MVS, Sky Moore, Rashid Rice, and Justin Ross. It's not a crazy team, not a crazy wide receiving room, but again, the scheme is what's really going to hurt you. The interior of the line for the Chiefs is really good. Toney and Humphreys are obviously really good. Donovan Smith was not great last year for the Buccaneers, and Juwan Taylor is good and not great. I think that tackle duo is where the Lions are going to have to win at if they want to win this football game. And obviously, I think the secondary is going to have to play pretty well versus Patrick Mahomes. But I think the pass rush is going to have to get home if we want a chance to win. Colts to keep Jonathan Taylor on the PUP list will miss 4 games of the season. That is going to hurt his draft stock in fantasy a lot. Anybody that's already drafted in fantasy and taken Jonathan Taylor, I do apologize. Defensively, again, I think we don't match up too poorly. George Karlaftis, Derek Nadine, Chris Jones might not play. And then you're obviously facing Felix Anudike Uzama, who was a former, I think, 2nd-round pick. Not bad, right? I think the Lions' offensive line can hold that group. And I think that, especially without Chris Jones, that is a significantly less scary front four. I don't think they have an awful pass rusher. Without Chris Jones, they certainly don't have an alpha pass rusher, at least on the exterior. We're going to see. Willie Gay, Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquil, I think are actually a really good trio of linebackers, and that does worry me a little bit. I'm not sure how our running backs are going to match up versus their linebackers. Hopefully, Jahmyr Gibbs can have a great day, but obviously that's easier said than done from a rookie making his debut. Safety-wise, Justin Reed and Brian Cook are 2 very solid safeties. Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed are good cornerbacks, but I think that we can beat them. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown will be able to beat him. I think Marvin Jones and Khalif Raymond will be able to work their way open. And I do think Sam Laporta will be able to work his way down the field as well. Again, Nick Bolton, I think, is a very good player. Nick Bolton might be able to might be able to take away from Sam Laporta a little bit, but I think the Lions have a lot of weapons. I don't know if the Kansas City Chiefs have enough to stop everything. So I think a high-scoring game could very much be in the balance. Patriots are cutting Bailey Zappi. That's a weird one to me, right? Obviously, Mac Jones is good, but you trusted Bailey Zappi last year to start games, even over Mac Jones at times. Cutting him just doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. The National Football League today has placed Asana Haskins of the Tennessee Titans on the commissioner exempt list following an incident this summer. May not practice or attend games. That is the first time I've ever heard that. Wow, I've never heard of the exempt the commissioner exempt list before. Wow, I mean, I know what he did, and I'm not saying it's not deserved. Just I've never seen that before. You would have think there's been some other guys that have done things that deserve to be on that list, but he can't attend games or practices. That's crazy. And I'm assuming that's an indefinite suspension. So 9 days free JMO. I don't think JMO's getting freed anytime soon, especially not in the next 9 days, unfortunately. But I do hope that he's allowed to at least get medical treatment, right? I know he's not like allowed to practice or play, obviously, but hopefully you think he could get medical treatment. Right now, 2 players I want with the Bears. Look at Connor Galvin. Stay away from my boy Connor. Don't you dare touch Connor Galvin, Bears. I would be so irate. I would hate that so much. Connor Galvin is my guy. I don't want that to happen. Yeah, Bailey Zappi is gone. That's crazy. Brian Branch and St. Brown came in with the same chip on their shoulder, getting drafted after players they knew they were better than. Yeah. And I think that's why Brian Branch is so good. I think that's why Amon-Ra St. Brown is partially so good. They're players that play with chips, and they're players that are playing to win chips. So it's a great mindset to have as a football player. Lions waive Starling Thomas the 5th. That is what I assumed was going to happen. If you watched my video yesterday, I said that he was going to get cut over Stephen Gilmore. And it looks like he was cut over Stephen Gilmore. I haven't seen anything about Stephen yet, and it seems like Starling Thomas is on the way out. Again, I think this is because Starling Thomas didn't have as many big plays, didn't have any big takeaways in the preseason, and ended up not being very flashy, meaning he's not in the media, he's not in the news, he's not being talked about, and we can just kind of sit back and wait for him to join the practice squad. I think he's a much better candidate for the practice squad than Stephen Gilmore. And I think Stephen Gilmore simply outplayed him in camp, in preseason, everything. So a little, obviously sucks to see him go, but I'm not necessarily surprised, honestly. I'm really, really not surprised by that. Let's see. Chase Cota, yes or no? Yes. I think Chase Cota will absolutely make the roster as the 6th wide receiver, especially with Jameson Williams being out. I think that opens up a great spot for Chase Cota. I think that you're obviously going to have, of course, Cota was cut. Imagine, as I'm talking about him. If Chase Cota was cut, that doesn't leave very many players on the Lions roster for wide receiver. Why? Because he was good. Don't get me wrong. Starling Thomas was good, but it wasn't better than Stephen Gilmore. It wasn't better. Why is Will Harris still on the team? Because it would cost more for the Lions to cut him than it would for the Lions to keep him. I don't understand why he wouldn't be allowed treatment or practice. Ed giving up his game checks already, being suspended. It's his own time. The NFL has a lot of weird rules. The NFL has a lot of interesting rules. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I have no idea if they are or not. The Lions said they haven't had any confirmation about that. So we'll see. I feel like he should, though. Like, even if the doctors have to go somewhere else, like if they have to go to Jameson Williams so he's not in the team facility, which I guess makes sense, right? You can't have a suspended player on team grounds. But you would think that they would be allowed, like, just in the training room or just even like in between practices where he's the only one there. It's just him and the doctor. You think there'd be some way to do that. I've yet to see Chase Cota getting cut. However, we'll see. They can't waive Gilmore. He's 1,000% not clear. No, he won't clear. If they cut Stephen Gilmore, he is getting taken immediately. So there's no way they can. Like I said, they have a much better chance of Starling Thomas dropping than they do Stephen Gilmore. It's that simple. I think Stephen Gilmore is a great player. I think he'll come back to the practice squad, but we'll see. 170 people here. I just want to say thank you, everybody, for showing up on a random Tuesday afternoon at 4 in the afternoon. I know everybody's at work. Everybody's got things going on, and we're all here to watch the Detroit Lions build this hopefully, fingers crossed, championship roster. So I just want to thank everybody for being here today. Again, if you've not gone down below and liked the video, if you have not subscribed, go down below and do so. Do both. And, obviously help the channel reach 3,000 subscribers if you enjoy Detroit Lions content. Let's see. I don't know if Starling Thomas makes it through waivers. I don't know if he does either, but I think there's a better chance that he makes it as opposed to Stephen Gilmore. Stephen Gilmore, I think, has a much better chance. I think Starling Thomas has a much better chance of making it through waivers than Starling Thomas does. Starling Thomas is a little under the radar, has yet to be talked about, was a UDFA, didn't make the Detroit Lions, didn't have a super flashy preseason. I think there's a better chance that he makes it through waivers than Stephen Gilmore. Lions are paying Will Harris $2.5 this season either way. His contract is fully guaranteed, but because of the 5th-year veteran benefit, they get a salary cap discount of 1.3 if they keep him on the roster. That's why he is on the team. More NFL cuts. We knew about Darrell Davis. I've yet to see Chase Cota. I believe you when you say it, but I've yet to see it, meaning I'm still holding out hope that he does have it. Chicago Bears got that QB2. That's true, but it doesn't necessarily not make sense, right? BJ Walker was costing them a lot more money. They're able to cut him. They're able to save $2 million, and they're able to move on, right? Get a guy that's still good and do that. Felt like Dorsey and Gilmore passed him up in camp, went on. I don't know if Dorsey makes it either. I know they like Dorsey, but Dorsey's a 5'8" defensive back. It's just he's not great in coverage. Got boxed out a lot. I'm a huge Lions fan. I appreciate that. Me too. Anybody hear anything about Mike Evans? I have not heard anything about Mike Evans. I don't think he's going to get traded to the Lions. Might get traded, but I don't think he'll get traded to the Lions. Cota should end up on the practice squad. Cota deserves to be on the active roster. That's what Chase Cota deserves. Bailey Zappi is cut. I doubt the Lions are going to go get him. Gilmore, I think, rightfully made it over Thomas. I think he deserves it. Thomas holds a lot, but it didn't really hurt him too much. I think he'd only got 1, maybe 2 flags in the preseason. So as far as if you have him as your 7th cornerback, by all means, I think he's well worth it. How is Matt Nelson still in it? Matt Nelson had a good preseason. He got worked the first game, but the last 2 games, he was pretty good. Matt Nelson is very liked by Dan. That's it. That's all. No, I think Matt Nelson, I did a whole video on Matt Nelson and Connor Galvin the other day. They both played very well in the preseason. I know that Matt Nelson gets a lot of flack for losing the very first rep of the preseason and getting picked off on that pass to Jameson Williams, but for the most part, he played really well. Actually, for the most part, the exterior of the offensive line played very well for the Detroit Lions, and it was just great. It was really good. Plus, as a huge Ducks fan, Cota is my boy. I really wanted Cota to make it. I don't know if he has. I've heard from the chat that he's been cut, but I haven't officially seen any reports that he's been cut. So fingers are still crossed. Hope is still being held out. Cota's size will make the roster. It wouldn't surprise me. It definitely wouldn't surprise me. Cota should be on the practice squad, but he may be a guy as well as Matt Nelson and Will Harris. We'll see. We will see. Will Harris is still on the roster. If anybody's hoping for Will Harris to get kicked off the roster, I think you're going to be very much sad after today. What about Cooper Kupp? I'm pretty sure Cooper Kupp is still on the Rams, to my knowledge. I don't believe he's here. Ramon, I don't know. Well, yeah, obviously fake news, but it's fun news, right? It's we don't want Will Harris here, but he's still here. Cota has not been cut yet. Anybody telling you otherwise is lying. Like I said, I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if he will get cut, but we're certainly going to see. Great to see Levi Onwuzurike make it through camp healthy, adds extra depth. Not only did he make it through camp healthy, he was good. Levi Onwuzurike was legitimately winning, splitting double teams, creating pressure instantly. He was legitimately good as a pass rusher in the preseason. So not only is he going to make the roster, I bet he plays in week 1 because he was, like I said, that good in the preseason, that good throughout camp. He deserves it. We officially hit 200 viewers today. I'm almost confident that is a streaming record for this channel. Of the 201 of you that are here, if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, go down below and do so. We are 52 away from 3,000. So if just a quarter of you subscribe that you have not done so yet, we're going to hit 3,000 today. And again, if you've not hit the like video, go down below and do that as well. It helps the channel out a ton. And we are going to keep hopefully climbing and building this record even further. I'm hoping he doesn't get cut. I'm just saying there's no news verifying he has or has not. Yeah, that's what I've been saying. I've heard it, but I have not read it. And until Adam Schefter himself says it, I do not believe it. I'm in the parking lot at Allen Park right now. Just saw Chase Cota walk out. Harris is still inside the facility. Oh, Ramon. What about Chase Young? Again, Chase Young, I would assume, as far as I know, is still on the Commanders, and I don't think he's going anywhere. And I think he's there to stay. Howdy, how you doing? I like your name. I'm a big fan of Anthony's, and I'm doing pretty good. How you doing? Trade Mike Evans to the Lions. Please do not trade Mike Evans to the Lions. Brady Breeze officially has not been cut yet either, as far as anybody is aware. As far as I know, Brady Breeze as well as Ifeatu Melifonwu are 2 safeties that are still on the roster. So we have that for right now. We'll see if this has been updated. Yep, Benny Snell has been taken, but other than that, as has Starling Thomas. Other than that, we're still missing out on a couple. I think we'll go till 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, if we don't have anything done, I'm just going to have to unfortunately get off and go. But that leaves us with a bit more time to talk some Detroit Lions, to talk about cuts and signings and everything like that. And we're going to keep chugging along. Trade for who? I'd probably trade for nobody, to be honest. The Lions don't have any holes to fill. Like, can the Lions get better? Sure. But today is not the day to make a blockbuster trade. Today is not the day to, trade away your first-round pick for Chris Jones. Today is not the day to trade for all-pro running back Jonathan Taylor. It's just not. Is Amon-Ra going to make it through cuts? I think he will. I feel pretty confident saying that Amon-Ra is going to make it through camp. I think he, I didn't play in the preseason, obviously, because of that ankle injury, but I think he was good enough in camp to certainly make the roster, and I think we're going to see him have an impact this year for sure. Definitely. I know I was real worried about it for a little bit too. The ankle injury obviously kept him out, but hey, I think he made it. I think at this point we can confidently say Amon-Ra has officially made the team. Hole at kicker, but who are you going to trade for at kicker? Who are you going to trade for at the kicking position? Everybody that's worth having on a roster is staying on a roster. Like, there's just nobody out there, right? There's nobody to trade for, because if they're worthy of being traded, they are on a roster, or they're going to be way too expensive to get rid of. What do you think about Mike Evans? I think Mike Evans would be a waste of a trade, to be honest. I don't think we need him. I don't think we even want him necessarily. He's just going to take away targets from other players that you've drafted, other players you've developed. He's going to take away targets from Gibbs. He's going to take away targets from Laporta. He's going to be loud when he does it. We just don't need Mike Evans, especially for what it would cost, probably a third-round pick, second-round pick. We don't need Mike Evans. We really, really don't. How much does the Lions have in cap space? I don't know for sure. Obviously, it's going to change as more players get cut and signed and everything like that. According to Over the Cap, the Lions have just over $19 million in cap space at the moment. Oh, there's that. Kicker, O-line depth, wide receiver. I disagree. Well, kicker, yes. Kicker, absolutely. O-line depth, not really. Colby Sorsdale was fine. Graham Glasgow is a great depth piece, as is Matt Nelson. They're going to bring back Connor Gallivan if he doesn't get snatched away. They have fine offensive line depth. Again, wide receiver, unless you're going out and getting an elite wide receiver one, you don't need wide receiver depth, right? Chase Cota and Antoine Green were great in the preseason. They're great wide receiver depth. You already have Jones and Reynolds and Raymond and St. Brown and Williams. There's just not there's no point in trading for a depth wide receiver when he probably isn't better than the guys already on the roster. So kicker, I'd give you. Other things, not really worthy of trading today. Said Amon-Ra St. Brown was just seen in the parking lot. Yeah, it's out there. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's hurt. You never know what happens. Robbie Gould isn't hurt. I thought he was. I thought he was with the Niners and got hurt. I thought he was, but maybe I'm wrong. Non-secure. The Jets Hard Knocks has been 0. That's true. It's true. Lions are top tier entertainers. There are reports this morning about James Houston being trade bait. That is reports by people who don't know what the Detroit Lions are all about. 19, sign Robbie Gould. If he's available, I mean, he wouldn't be a bad option for sure. Brad Holmes wanted Peter Skoronski at 12. I doubt it. I really, really doubt it. It's the Lions draft episode. Khalif is a dog. He torched the Jags and stood out to me the most. Khalif Raymond is very good. If that's what we're talking about, Khalif Raymond is a very, very good football player. Goff was just seen leaving the facilities. Oh, my goodness, guys. I mean, hey, Teddy Bridgewater looked pretty good in the playoffs. You see him in week 3 against the Panthers. That guy was dealing to everybody. Goff was cut. Hutch was cut. I mean, hey, neither of them played in the preseason. Who knows? They didn't earn their spot. They weren't good enough to play. Let's see. Gould is old and doesn't have a leg anymore. I don't know. I know a lot about Robbie Gould. I don't know a lot about where he stands right now. So we'll see. Sign Zappy, cut Goff. Zappy is 1-0 against Jared Goff. He is 1-0. Who was the 4th TB? The 4th T. What is TB? My immediate thought went to Tampa Bay. I'm not sure. Yes, at training camp, Khalif doesn't get a lot. No, Khalif Raymond is phenomenal. Khalif Raymond is very, very good. Sign Zappy, Goff, tailback. I got you. I always think of halfback, HB, RB. Tailback's never in the back of my mind. The 4th tailback is probably Jamar Jefferson. Cut Will Harris. It's not going to happen. Damn, Penei Sewell's cut. Again, guys got to play in the preseason. It's got to happen. It's got to go down. Nate Sudfeld is being placed on injured reserves, to my knowledge. He tore his ACL against Carolina and is probably done for 2023. Gibbs and Montgomery cut. Hey, Montgomery got hurt in camp, never played in the preseason, just like St. Brown. Got to get him out of here. If they can't play, they can't be on the Lions. That's just simple cut and dry business. He's going to have a roll in his wheelchair. Will Harris is not getting cut. Bailey Zapp is 29-0 against Goff. Hey, 1-0 record, 29-0 score. Clearly, Bailey Zappi is a better quarterback than Jared Goff. Anybody surprised to get cut? Sterling Thomas was probably a surprise to most people. He's a player that a lot of people thought was going to make the roster. Other than that, not too many. Not too many at all. Emmanuel Mosley, that was probably the biggest surprise today. Sterling Thomas was probably the biggest surprise. Adrian Martinez will be back. Connor Galvin will be back if he's not signed away. I guess maybe Christian Covington or Jermaine Ifedi, but nobody that surprising has really been taken away from the Detroit Lions. Can we talk about the QB pressure we're going to give every single down from this D-line group? It's going to be really fun to watch. It really, really will be. The Lions front 7 is solid. It's really solid. Because you have obviously Hutchinson, you have Houston, you have Harris, you have Okwara, you have Kaminsky, you have Pascal. In the interior, you have Onwuzurike, you have Ali McNeil, you have Broderick Martin in up double teams, you have Isaiah Buggs, who was really good. It's going to be a lot of rotation, and it's going to be a lot of pressure, I think, from the Lions, because they're just going to go after it and after and after it. And they legitimately might keep 10 guys on the defensive line just to fully rotate guys in all the time and keep everybody fresh. Let's see. Let's get Prater back. I mean, if it's for cheap, if it's for a 7th round pick, I don't see why not. Matt Prater still's got a leg on him. Glad Thomas got cut. I don't care if you stand out in practice. It's all about the game. It's not even that Starling Thomas had a bad game. Like, he absolutely locked down Jalen Hyatt in week 1. It's just the fact that he didn't make any big splashy plays and kind of plateaued at the end, kind of like what they're saying right here. But whereas, Stephen Gilmore had 2 interceptions in 3 games. Sudfeld is not making the team. He doesn't have an NFL arm. Nate Sudfeld is going to be on the team. Nate Sudfeld is going to be on the injury reserve list, so he won't count against the active roster, but he will be a member of the Detroit Lions football team going forward. Cut Nate Sudfeld. Can't really cut a guy who's on injured reserves. How many left do we need to cut? I don't know for sure. I think it's about 7 is who we got left. Wonder if it says. I don't know for sure. We've cut quite a few. I think we have about 6 or 7 left. So we'll wait and see a little bit. I think probably 45, 5 o'clock we'll get off and see. An hour should be plenty of time for the Detroit Lions to get out their news. Finalizing injury settlement with Shane Gonzalez, which will lead to his release. They'll be down to 1 kicker who's hurt, and Jake Moody. That's kind of interesting. Let's see. Not a whole lot. Gilmore over Thomas is the right choice. If anybody disagrees, they didn't watch enough of the preseason. All in on Will Greer being the 3rd dude until Hooker is cleared. Love his emotion after the Cowboys game. Maybe, but I think it's going to be Adrian Martinez. He knows the playbook. The Lions love him. I think it's going to be Adrian Martinez coming back. I thought that decision had to be made. Decisions were made by 4, but the communication about said decisions isn't quite as timely as a lot of people would hope for. So the roster is made. The roster is solidified. We just don't fully know everybody that has been cut yet because they just haven't gotten all the news out. Like if they made the decision at 3:59, it's just going to take a little bit of time to get out. We can hate Nate Sudfeld all we want, but dude is hella tough for walking off the field. Hey, anybody that gets injured is kind of has my sympathy. I hate injuries. I wish injuries were not part of the game. If nothing else, Nate Sudfeld obviously cares about this team. Nate Sudfeld obviously has put blood, sweat, and tears into this team. And should he have made the active roster if he was healthy? Probably not. Am I glad that it all not worked out, but he gets to stay on the team and we don't have to see him play? It kind of worked out in the end, as bad as that is to say. We are at 250 viewers today. Absolutely killing it today with everybody here. Ragnow just left the facility. I'm pretty sure Frank Ragnow's making the roster. I have a strong feeling that Ragnow, despite not playing in the preseason like Goff and St. Brown, I think he's going to make it. He seems like a real Dan Campbell guy, so I think he's going to make it. Little bit of a surprise. Thomas was in the driver's seat for the roster spot all camp, but it's not like you can't say he didn't get outplayed by Gilmore down the stretch. Assuming Gilmore got the nod, Mosley coming off the pup took away his roster spot. That's true. That's true. If Mosley wasn't activated, I think Starling Thomas makes the roster. I think Starling Thomas is like the first guy they're going to have back if they can manage it. Bailey Zappi surprises me. Lions sign Robbie Gould. Dan Campbell just left the facility too. Oh my God. A bad day. We lost all our best players, but at least we have $200 million in cap space. That's facts. That's facts. We'll go out there and we'll sign so many big free agents next year with all of our $200 million of cap space. It's going to be incredible. We need a kicker. We do, but we don't at the same time. It's not like a massive hole like it was last year. You're not serious about Goff and Brown. Oh, we're dead serious. They didn't play in the preseason. They got to go. They're off the team. Man, if you can't even put on shoulder pads for a preseason game, you can't even go out there for a series for your team and your teammates. Like, how do we expect you to play through an injury? How do we expect players to make the roster when they're not playing in games? It's bad. They can't do it. Brad Holmes just resigned. Dude, that would be so awful. Like if Brad Holmes ever resigned, that would suck. Bailey Zappi was a 4th-round pick. Imagine if we cut Hooker after half a season. Yeah, it wouldn't be very good for us. Not very good for us at all. Other teams are cutting kickers. I mean, possibility they're going to be better than the ones we have. I doubt it. Riley Patterson was actually a starter last year on a playoff caliber team. Got them to the playoffs, was really good last year. Always really good in games. Doesn't necessarily have the elite range, but has pretty good accuracy. St. Brown is in the lobby fighting with Will Harris. Imagine Amon-Ra is just like in the front lobby throwing hands with Will Harris because Will Harris won't get out. So you're saying if they didn't play, then Hutch is going too. Yeah. Yep. Hutch is out. Hutch is gone. Aiden Hutchinson's gone. He's not a Dan Campbell guy. Didn't want to play in the preseason. Grew out his hair a little bit. Dan Campbell didn't like it. He said, you're sitting on the bench, and he didn't play in the preseason. Didn't deserve it. Jerry Jacobs is a Dan Campbell guy. Jerry Jacobs is on the roster. I don't care if he didn't play. I'm going against what I'm saying before. He's a Dan Campbell guy. That UDFA, he's got, that chip on his shoulder. That's what we want. We don't want those first-round picks. We don't want the high-paid franchise quarterbacks. We want the UDFA guys that have something to prove and want to play in the preseason. Can't lie, Harris got a hand. If only he could use those hands on the football field. Well, I definitely don't want a kicker in there. That's the final second of a game. And there's 52-yard field goal needs to be made if he can't make it, but he doesn't have the leg. Yeah, I get it. Like, I get the lack of range, but how many games came down to a 51-yard field goal last year? So they're going to cut. No, Hendon Hooker's injured. That's different. He's on the NFI list. He already doesn't count for the roster spot. You guys need to pick it up. You guys need to get with it. Come on. Hendon Hooker on the NFI list already doesn't count. Same thing as Nate Sudfeld. It's a whole different situation, guys. Patriots also, I did see the Patriots cut Malik Cunningham, which I was a little surprised about too. Campbell thought Hutch was Hawkinson. He said, what are you doing back here? That must be what it is. Because why wouldn't you play Aiden Hutchinson, right? Your best edge rusher, he doesn't play for the first 3 games of the season. He had to have thought he was TJ Hawkinson. That's got to be what it is. Let's see if there's any other news. Panthers are releasing Shi Smith. Interesting. Who does make the roster? Jameson Williams. That guy played in the preseason. That guy gave it all. Got some heart. That guy will make the roster. Wish he was using his hands for football. JMO was just traded for a 400th overall pick. Man, you would have had me if 400th overall pick existed. PJ Walker might be the Lions' 3rd string after the Bears released him. I doubt it, because I think PJ Walker is going to want a little bit of money, and I don't think the Lions are going to want to pay that money. Let's see. No more news. Come on, Lions. I know we got stuff going on. I know we got things to do. Starling Thomas, the most recent cut of the Detroit Lions. Just want to make sure there's nothing new here. Doesn't seem to be. But yeah, it looks like the Lions roster is pretty set. Obviously, we still have a couple more cuts here and there. The Patriots did release Bailey Zappi. That's true. Which is weird because now they only have one quarterback, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. Sterling was a shock. Yes and no. Like I said, he got outplayed a lot towards the end of the preseason. Lions might make us all wait until Monday for the cuts. I hope not. Well, to quote Jonathan Gannon, the Lions are yet to name their cuts because they're looking for a competitive advantage. They don't want the Chiefs to know who they've cut any sooner than they have to, because then what if they're planning for, Stephen Gilmore and Stephen Gilmore's not on the roster? Then they wasted all that time and the Lions get the advantage, right? The Lions outthinking everybody, right? If you cut Jared Goff and start Teddy Bridgewater, I bet you the Chiefs aren't planning for that. See, outthinking people. Gotta outthink people. Lions, I already read that one. So we literally just signed CJ Gardner-Johnson, Cam Sutton. Are they cut? Yeah. Yep, I think that's exactly how it works. Obviously CJ Gardner-Johnson got hurt at camp, didn't play in the preseason. Got to play to make the team. He's on a 1-year deal. If you don't play, you're not playing. Didn't play in the preseason, don't make the team. Cam Sutton, I think he has a better chance, right? Bigger contract, more money incentivized into it, but you might want to bench him for Stephen Gilmore. Stephen Gilmore looked locked down in the preseason, and Cam Sutton didn't contest a single pass in the preseason. Didn't do a thing in the preseason. And Stephen Gilmore had 2 picks. So I'm just saying. Zappy would be a good third-string quarterback for the Lions. Not bad. Not a bad quarterback. PJ Walker's actual trash in the preseason. That is true as well. What kicker do you think the Lions will go after? It's really hard to say. It's really, really tough to say. Again, not a ton of talented players out there, but we will see. So the true roster is 69 players. Nice. You're beating this joke to death. I'm just telling you how it is. You guys keep asking the questions. I'm just going to keep answering them. Robbie Gold wants to be close to home. Is Robbie Gold from Michigan? I don't know if he is or not. It's a genuine question, but I have no idea. If he does, I mean, if he's healthy and he wants to come kick for the Lions, by all means, if he can still kick, bring him in. Chicago, that's pretty close. That's pretty close to it. See, I got somebody. Exactly. Chicago's close enough. I kind of thought Lucas was going to make it for Mosley. I mean, Dorsey made the team, or Thomas, maybe a recall after they sneak a player through and place him on IR. That could be too. We sat our starters, so that's why Hutchinson didn't. I'm fully aware of why Aiden Hutchinson didn't play. Did we cut Chase Cota? Not yet. Not to my knowledge, we have not cut Chase Cota. Gold is older than a fossil, but if that man can kick field goals, that man can play for my team because we kind of need it. Goff was a bottom 10 quarterback in away games. Why this comparing him to Mahomes? I don't think anybody's comparing him to Mahomes. At least I don't think they are. Like, he's not Mahomes, but he was a top 10 quarterback last year, so he's pretty good. I don't know if anybody's comparing him. Why is Brady Breeze still on the roster? He might not be, but for the most part, I would say special teams versatility and work ethic. I think those are the 2 things that Brady Breeze brings the most, and I really like him. Yeah, Brady Breeze for sure. Cutting Bradley Roby, failed to trade him. Interesting. I think he could have at least been on the roster. If could still had it, he'd still be in San Francisco. I think something's up. It could be for sure. Robbie Gold's expensive. The Lions have $19 million in cap space. They're fine. I'd love to see Gilmore make the team. I'm pretty sure at this point Gilmore has made the team. Would you think? Who do you think should make the team when it comes to roster bubbles? Stephen Gilmore obviously should make the team. He played way too well not to make the team. I think Corey Durden is a sneaky guy that could make the team. He's a guy that, was really good in the preseason. And I think despite having a lot of depth there, it could potentially work. Other than that, not too many UDFAs making the roster. I think there's a lot of UDFAs that are going to make the practice squad. I think Brandon Joseph will be on the practice squad. I think Starling Thomas will be on the practice squad. Dylan Drummond is a practice squad guy. Connor Galvin, Adrian Martinez are practice squad guys. So a lot of practice squad, just not quite good enough to make the active roster because of the depth the Lions have built up. Brady Breeze, elite special teamer. Brady Breeze is really good on special teams. Any relation to Drew Brees? I do not believe so, considering they spell their last names differently. Think the Mike Evans rumors are legit. I doubt it. If they're talking about trading him away from Tampa Bay, I think that might have some merit to it. If you're talking about trading him to the Detroit Lions, I would be really, really surprised. I don't think it's going to happen, but we'll see. We shall see. The Lions could definitely use an Alpha X, but Mike Evans is like 30, I'm pretty sure. And I don't think they want him that much. So they would have to give up quite a bit, and I don't think it's going to work out. What else do we have? Gilmore shouldn't make the team. His hair is long, not a Dan Campbell kind of guy. They're cutting all the players with long hair. Hey, Kelvin Shepard has long hair. He was going to cut it for his interview. Dan Campbell told him not to cut it. That seems exactly like a thing that Dan Campbell would be into is that long dreadlock hair. The coaches have it. I think the players can have it. Great analysis of the kicker situation. Thomas was a lock to make the roster according to most beat writers. This one seems like a real stunner. Not if you were paying attention. Not if you was paying attention. Anzalone's not cutting his hair. That's true. That's true. It's the blonde hair. It's the thing that keeps him going. That's also true. Dan Campbell also had long hair, so the Vikings won't ever suck as long as Justin Jefferson and Kevin O'Connell. We will see. What if Justin Jefferson doesn't make the roster? Exactly. Weren't ready for that. Let's see. David Stills is gone. Interesting. There's a rub with that's been the rub with illegal contact and holding have been an issue all summer. My last memory of Denzel Mims in Detroit will be him profanely telling Thomas to stop holding all the time. It's funny. Super Bowl bound. I hope so. Lions waive Sterling Thomas, which came as a surprise per a league source. Candidate to be claimed off of waivers. Yeah, I think the odds of him returning are kind of slim. Not that the Lions don't want him to return. I just don't know if he's going to make it through. Tell me way we keep Jefferson and Will Harris. I think they'll both make the roster. Will Harris for contractual reasons. Jamar Jefferson for depth reasons. He's the only running back left on the roster. So unless the Lions are only keeping 3, I think Jamar Jefferson has made the roster. That's kind of funny though. Last memory of Denzel Mims. We'll stop holding him all the time. It's funny. But and I think they'll both make the roster. Will Harris is a fine slot cornerback. If you're paying him to be your cornerback 4 and 5, and you have a leadership guy in there with some veteran experience, it's not a bad deal for him. So we're winding down here. We got about 9 minutes left. So hopefully the Lions release a couple more cuts so we can talk about those before. But for now, why don't we just go over the cuts one more time? We'll just talk about everybody that didn't make it and guys that might want to return to the practice squad. Darrell Daniels, I don't think will. Glad to see we didn't keep Nevin Lawson 2.0. If you're talking about Starling Thomas, I don't think that's quite what it was. Parker Romo, I think, could come back. Brandon Joseph, I fully expect to be back. Benny Snell, I expect to be in the practice squad. Same with Starling Thomas. Drummond, absolutely. Connor Galvin, absolutely. Adrian Martinez, absolutely. Ryan Swoboda, maybe. Not guaranteed, but likely. Chase Lucas will absolutely be on the practice squad if he's allowed. Why they didn't cut Will Harris? Only thing he showed, again, it's contractual reasons. Contracts are killers in the NFL, and if you have a good contract, you're kind of untouchable. Joseph got cut a couple hours ago. Yeah, unfortunately for him, he was really good. Let's see. Jameson Williams will come off suspension for the active roster. Trinity Benson, I think, will make the practice squad. Maybe Abini Azee, probably Jermaine Ifedi, Christian Covington, Colby Richardson potentially. But I think they're going to have a couple open spots on the practice squad. Dude went from a second-round Northwestern safety to safety of Notre Dame who didn't even make a roster. Yeah, it is true, but in his defense, the Lions roster is pretty deep at safety. So it's not like it was a bad thing on him. It was more like, yeah, but as an undrafted free agent, you're not beating out Tracy Walker, Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Brady Breeze, and Ifeatu Melifonwu. Realistically, he's the 6th or 7th safety on the roster. So you still start with a 7th round Lucas, but they cut him. You could, but that's why Will Harris is going to be like the 6th or 7th cornerback. He's going to stay on the roster, but I don't think he's going to play very much, which is what a lot of Lions fans want to hear. What is going on with Chase Cota? To my knowledge, he is still on the roster. Haven't seen anything about him quite yet being cut. We will see. This is the official waiver wire order for all the players who have been waived. Teams will have until tomorrow to place a claim on a player. The Lions sit at 18th. which is not bad. How many UDFA cornerbacks do we have, and how many were actually drafted? As far as like drafted / signed to the Lions, Jerry Jacobs is a UDFA. Stephen Gilmore is a UDFA. Will Harris was drafted. Mosley, I think, was an undrafted free agent too. Cam Sutton, I don't remember. I don't know for sure, but I think he was drafted. We have at least 3 guys, though, that were UDFAs at one point as the cornerbacks, so not quite a few. I don't want him to play at all. Ideally not, but if it's going to save you $1.5 million for somebody else, it might be worth it. A lot of 49ers news, not a lot of Lions news, though, unfortunately. Kicker market's still active. The Saints cut Smoke Monday, Storm Norton, Jalen Smith, Bradley Roby, J.S.C. James, former Lion, as well as Darrell Williams and Ty Summers. Very, very interesting. But nothing about the Lions. We need Lions news. We need Lions rumors. We need cuts or trades or something fun to talk about because we have just a few minutes left, and I want one more big thing. The Colts don't have a player over 30. I don't know if the Lions do either. The Lions, I think their oldest player is 29 years old, and I believe it's Taylor Decker. Man, come on, Detroit. Make some noise. We need it. We need it. Chiefs trade your Amir Smith Marset. I blanked on the name. It's all a lot of good cuts if that makes sense. It makes sense. There's a lot of good cuts. They're unfortunate cuts, obviously, but they're cuts that need to be made. People we go after, yeah. So it's really unfortunate. Obviously, roster cut down day is probably the saddest day of the year, other than any Sunday that the Detroit Lions. Oh, that's true. Marvin Jones is over 30. I forgot about him. I forgot Marvin Jones was over 30. That's right. Roster cut down day is sad. Roster cut down day is a sad day. Probably the saddest day until the Lions lose, which isn't going to happen this year. So it's the saddest day of the season for the Lions because they're going to go undefeated after this and win the Super Bowl. But a lot of good players getting cut. A lot of unfortunate players not being around anymore. So it is very unfortunate. Justin Fields was a different player after week 6. Anything he did in the NFL prior to that should thrown in the scrap heap. Yep, because none of that matters. Nothing Justin Fields did until he started playing well matters at all. Didn't Houston demand to be cut before the Bills game if he didn't start playing time? Holmes might hold the. I don't think so. I don't remember that ever being said. And I can't imagine as a 6th round rookie who got cut, you're going to demand playing time. I've never heard that story before, so I doubt it. But I guess it's not impossible. I just have never heard that side of the story. I've never heard of that being a thing. So if it's true, maybe, but I don't think so. On Anthony Kendall, great name, was unranked as a high school recruit with 0 offers to division level. Kendall decided to attend Baldwin Wallace University, Division III, for 5 seasons. Kendall didn't receive an NFL Combine invite, so he attended 3 different pro days in a 5-day span. Scouts took notice of Kendall's athletic ability, but he ultimately ended up going undrafted. Titans signed him. He's UDFA and showed out in training camp today. He's announced that he made the 53-man roster. That is awesome. That is really, really cool. I love stories like that because, anybody has the opportunity. Do the Lions claim a QB? Probably not. I doubt it. I don't think that they will. I think they have their QB room that they want. So, all right, guys, I think that might be the end of it. The Detroit Lions roster cut down day went pretty much according to plan. Jake McQuaid, 35. Jake McQuaid is not on the roster anymore. Graham Glasgow, 30. Halapaloi. So we got a little older. Fair enough. I know last year we had no players over 30, though, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, thank you guys all so very much for stopping by. Over 250 live viewers at a certain time in this video. Currently sitting at 224. Love everybody that showed up. Appreciate everybody for being here, talking some Lions football. Had an absolute blast on roster cutdown day. Nothing too surprising. Still have a couple of cuts left to be announced, but for the most part, the Lions roster is set. Practice squad should be coming out in just a couple of days. And until then, we have 9 days until Thursday Night Football versus the Kansas City Chiefs. So thank you all guys so much for watching. Appreciate y'all for being here for the live stream. Until next time, and as always, go Lions. See you guys.